social media platforms at Shortwood SDA Church. Until next time, be blessed and be a blessing.
And laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the Queen, the public weal, peace and tranquility of the island, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
The House may be seated. This Honourable House now resumes its sitting. Call of the roll.
Mr. Bartlett, Mr. Holness, Dr. Clark, Dr. Chang, Mr. Montague, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Samuda, Ms. Grange, Mrs. Williams, Mrs. Mallow-Fort, Dr. Tufton, Mr. McKenzie, Mr. Chuck, Mr. Vaz, Mr. Warmington, Mr. Charles, Mr. Green, Mr. Morgan, Mr. Hutchinson, Mr. Terry Long, Ms. Smith, Dr. Dunn, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Mr. Main, Mr. Davis, Mr. Witter, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brown-Burke, Dr. Charles, Mr. Chin, Mr. Clark, Mr. Cousins, Ms. Crawford, Ms. Daly, Ms. Davis, Mr. Golding, Mr. Graham, Dr. Guy, Ms. Hamilton, Ms. Hannah, Mr. Henriquez, Mr. Henry, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Lawrence, Ms. Lee, Mr. Miller, Ms. Morrison, Mrs. Nita Garvey, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Siblist, Mr. Slowly, Mrs. Vaz, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Williams, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Wright, Mr. Clark,
we have a very long list of items for today's session. We will commence with tributes. House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there are two former members of this Honorable House who made their exit to another place over the last few weeks. And we do wish to record their contribution, worth, and value, not just to this chamber, Madam Speaker, but to the nation at large. I make specific reference, Madam Speaker, to the former Minister, Senator, and Member of Parliament, Dr. Paul Douglas Robertson, Commander of the Order of Distinction. Dr. Paul Robertson CD served as a parliamentarian for almost 20 years, but his dedication to public service, Madam Speaker, was lifelong. Dr. Robertson began his parliamentary career in the Senate in March 1989 and served for one term in that place. While a senator, he served as Minister without Portfolio in the Office of the Prime Minister, Minister of Information and Culture, Minister of the Public Service and Information, and Deputy Leader of Government Business in the Senate. The remainder of his parliamentary life, Madam Speaker, was spent in this House, where he gave the representation to the people of St. Catherine Southeastern from 1993 to 2007. During that time, he also served as Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Minister of Industry, Investment and Commerce, Minister of Industry and Investments, and Minister of Development. In 2008, he was awarded the Order of Distinction in the rank of Commander for his dedicated service as a parliamentarian. Madam Speaker, what sets Dr. Robertson apart, however, in my view, was his commitment to uplifting the people around him. Dr. Robertson, or Dr. Paul, as we affectionately call him in our circles, he and I, having served on the then Electoral Advisory Committee, which is the forerunner to the now Commission, in the early days of its formation. And, he was so warm and friendly and had such an infectious smile, that he always had a little line for us each time we meet that would break the monotony of the drudgery, in fact, Madam Speaker, of having to pore over, reams and reams of paper and document relating to electoral matters. Dr. Robertson indeed was dedicated to education and taught at the secondary and tertiary level. Moreover, Dr. Robertson served as the chairman of the Jamaica Movement for the Advancement of Literacy. I don't know how many of us remember Jamal in those early days. It now has morphed into the Jamaica Foundation for Lifelong Learning, which is so critical today. I really remember Paul as being truly such a congenial person. He was a friend to all. And we certainly will miss his contribution, certainly in the broader space, but most definitely we have been missing that in this honorable House and the other place. We want to extend, therefore, our most sincere condolences, Madam Speaker, to the Robertson family and the extended family as well, and even those in the former constituency that he served so well. May his soul rest in peace, Madam Speaker, and light perpetual shine on him.
Madam Speaker, I want to join my colleague, the Leader of Government Business, this afternoon in paying tribute to Dr. Paul Robertson. And even as the House Leader has presented a broad frame in which Dr. Robertson served, in both houses of Parliament and in government, others on our side will speak about his role in the party. my story is a bit more personal because I have reason to know Dr. Paul Robertson in a different kind of way. The truth is that I am in this house, I'm back in Jamaica, and I've participated in the life of the politics of this country for the last 20-odd years because of Paul Robertson and one other, the late Horace Clarke. Paul Robertson and Horace Clarke were, as individuals, responsible for my coming back to Jamaica and getting involved in representational politics. And Paul Robertson, as was said elsewhere and in many places, was someone who was a mentor to many persons, not just in the party politics, but in government and in public life. I had the benefit of not just him recruiting and mentoring me, but I was to follow in his footsteps in many of the ministries that he served as government minister. So that in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, I was there with him, both as his Minister of State and then at another time as the Minister of Foreign Trade. I then followed him into the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce at separate times. But in every instance, I would have had the wisdom, the benefit, and the experience of Dr. Paul Robertson. And I am one person who can say and must say on the record that I have benefited tremendously from the largesse, from the largeness of spirit and of mentorship and of camaraderie and of knowledge from Dr. Paul Robertson. And so, Madam Speaker, it is with a heavy heart that I pay tribute to him today in this House to acknowledge someone who has given much of his life to public service and in the process to the development of Jamaica. It is fitting that he has been recognized and awarded and honored for his service to Jamaica and to the development of the people of Jamaica. I was privileged to have spoken to him in the last 3 weeks before his death. And I must say that Paul Robertson, when I spoke to him on the last occasion, was as optimistic about life as he always has been. So it became more than a shock to hear of his untimely passing. I want to, in paying tribute to him, pay tribute to his family as well for allowing him the time and the space and bearing with all that we as public officials have to put up with and our families to have allowed him to give the quality and length of service that he has to Jamaica and the Jamaican people. I therefore pay condolences to the family and just note that, again, the sign of the times that many of us who would like to participate in the ceremony on Saturday at the Uemona Chapel will not be able to do so in person. And as soon as that can be lifted, we'll be all better off for it, because we need to pay homage in an appropriate way to some of our icons and some persons who have served us well. But my condolences, and long may his memory live, and Godspeed to Dr. Paul Robertson.
Member Paulwell.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and having regard to the presentation that we are awaiting, I will try to be brief in the circumstances. But, Madam Speaker, I met Dr. Paul when I became a member of the greatest institution in the Western Hemisphere in 1983. And at that time, I was quite surprised because when you would see Dr. Paul on TV, he was larger than life, and you thought his physical presence was the same. So when I met him for the first time at a conference, I was surprised at his size, but I was very impressed with his delivery. I next met him after that first conference later in 1983 when I snuck into a PNP NEC meeting. I was not a member of the NEC, but in those days the rules were a little less stringent. And it was in December 1983, a very significant time, because Paul was embroiled in an issue that forced a general election to be called in 1983, and I was present when that historic decision was made not to contest. I was very impressed with Paul's delivery, with his support for his party leader, the position that was taken, and the way he defended the position of the party, the principle that was being enunciated. And so I have had those experiences with him, and I've always found him to be somebody whose word you could rely on. My next major involvement with him was when he became my boss, because it was he that the Prime Minister had asked to try to convince me, I who was earning massive salary and in a very safe and protected job at the Fair Trading Commission, was asked to come and serve in the government. And we had to negotiate. And I think all of those negotiations, I think from those days we have stopped seeing the appointment of parliamentary secretaries, because that would have been a little bit below where I was coming from. And I became his junior minister. And it also represented the first time that a junior minister was no longer seen as the assistant to the minister, but rather being given specific portfolio responsibilities. And I think that tradition has continued, and it goes to show how secure Paul was and how confident he was that he could have afforded a young upstart specific responsibilities in a very important and dynamic ministry. He was legendary in his commitment to this country, his commitment to his party, and his support for his leader. One day, Madam Speaker, we were at a function. The ministry was involved in a major promotions function, investment function, and we were there awaiting the arrival of the Prime Minister. And we were well dressed as I am now. Yes. And when I looked at Paul, having arrived there fully dressed, I saw him removing his tie, take off the jacket and throw it aside, and was looking quite relaxed. I said, Paul, what is happening? He said to me, don't you see the Prime Minister? You see what he's wearing? You want to be fired? He did not want to outdo his Prime Minister. And immediately I had to do some unbuttoning because I couldn't outdo my minister. Such was the man. You know, Madam Speaker, I could go on and on. But I want to end on a personal note, because there are so many Jamaicans who have served in this life of politics. And invariably, because of the work and because of how we treat each other, there's always a stain that seems to attend the profession. And many of them I have been in the cabinet and have seen decent people, honest people who have served, and they retire because of that service, not well off. And I want to remember those in particular who are not well physically, who, and in fact, even present, their colleagues in this house. But I want to in particular remember those who are no longer here, who are not as they used to be, because age and aging is a process that will rob us of those attributes that we had before. And of course, there's one in particular that I will always want us to reach out and pray for. That's our former Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Portia Simpson Miller, at this time. And to extend that to Dr. Peter Phillips, who we all know is also going through his challenges, and indeed others who have been through those challenges. We want to bless them and to wish that their lives, experience will be further strengthened by good health. And, Madam Speaker, in relation to Dr. Paul, to say to his family, we thank you for allowing him to serve us in this way. And to him, may his soul rest in peace and light perpetual shine on him. Thank you.
Opposition Leader, if you don't mind, I would ask Member Robert Miller to speak first. Dr. Robertson was from his constituency, and then allow you to close as Leader of the Opposition. Or Angela Brown-Burke, and then allow you to close as Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would have sat here and listened to the tall resume of Dr. Paul Robertson. I was privileged to have met the man. The first time I met him was at the great high school, Bridgeport High School, within the constituency of Southeast St. Catherine, where Dr. Paul Douglas Robertson served as Member of Parliament. I later had the privilege of meeting him in person. As a matter of fact, around August last year, I went to my ophthalmologist, who is former member Rhoden, and Dr. Paul was there. And he came in, said morning to everyone, and introduced himself. And I said, Dr. Paul, it's a privilege for me to have met you in person. And he said, who are you? And I said, I'm Robert Miller. And he said, oh, you're the new man over so. And I said, yes. And he said, boy, on a young labor, I'd love wear green shirts up. And I had that privilege to have a picture taken of both of us. We had a brief discussion, and we changed numbers, and we kept in contact with each other. As a matter of fact, I told him that if he was still the Member of Parliament, I would not even think of running the constituency of Southeast St. Catherine, because he served the people well. And Dr. Paul was not a person that looks at color, but he dealt with everyone fairly. He's still loved within the constituency. The constituency of Southeast St. Catherine is still mourning the loss of Dr. Paul. And I can recall around 4 weeks ago, he called me and he said, Big Rob, I want you to come and check me by my residence so we can have a discussion about Southeast St. Catherine. And I said, Dr. Paul, I'm coming soon. Where are you living? And he said, St. Anne. And I said, okay, I'll call you and let you know when I'm coming. My wife and I was sojourning through St. Anne, and I said, the next 2 weeks, we're coming back to St. Anne to pay a visit to Dr. Paul Robertson. That same night, I received the news that he had passed, so that meeting wasn't meant to be. I know the constituency is grieving, and I bring condolences on behalf of the residents of Southeast St. Catherine to the family. Personally, I'd like to give my condolences to the family of the bereaved, And I would love to, as a Member of Parliament for South East, to do even more of what he had done for the constituency, because it was indeed a lot. And I'll try my endeavor best to serve the people well. And we just want to bring condolences to the family, friends, and well-wishers of Dr. Paul Douglas Robertson. Thank you.
Thanks, Member Miller. Member Brownberg.
Oops. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Dr. Paul has not just persons like Minister Bartlett know him, but we all know him as Dr. Paul. I would have met him in 1979 as a young girl from Wolmer's High who was seeking to study Spanish and get a university education from a family that wasn't quite sure how we could afford to do that, notwithstanding that there was UE and all of what was happening there, but we just simply couldn't afford to be able to spend lunch money, bus fare from Kingston coming in every day, and so on. So I stopped by PNP headquarters, encouraged by my mother, and I met Dr. Paul, who didn't know me, hadn't seen me before, but took the time to really talk to me about what it is that I was thinking of, what I wanted to do, and to encourage me as a young girl in pursuing higher education. Based on his recommendation, I left Jamaica in the summer of '79, and I was probably one of the few persons ever to have gotten to Cuba for a university degree, not knowing exactly what that degree would have been. And so I spent my first couple of months with those students who were studying medicine, and then confirmed in my mind that medicine is not where I was meant to be. And so I moved on. But that was how I met Dr. Paul, way back in 1979. As many would say, he's soft-spoken. I've never heard him shout. I don't know if anybody has heard him shout. But more importantly, he's an individual without airs, really humble individual, and one who is always known to put self and service, to put service rather above self, and that is service to country and to party. I thought that I would also place on record the fact that Dr. Paul would have returned to Jamaica in 1970 to active service in the party, and that he was, in fact, a protege of Michael Manley, one who understood the mission of the People's National Party and the importance of uplifting the masses of the people of Jamaica who were still living in the margins. I think it is important for us to talk about it, because sometimes when we hear others speak of the valiant service of Michael Manley and people like Paul Robertson, they tend to underestimate, devalue what that period meant to many who were not born with a gold spoon in their mouth, who did not come from one of the 21 families in Jamaica, but from individuals who relied on a political party like the People's National Party to make sure that they could feel comfortable in who they were, that they understood what was the mission of the party to improve their lot, and to ensure that those who were voiceless, who didn't know, who didn't have friends and connected to that kind of power, could have power through their voice, through the People's National Party. And I just thought that as we talk about Dr. Paul, we can't escape that. We have to remember that. I thought also, as we pause to pay tribute to him, I want to remind all of us that we all come to serve, and we all come to ensure that the lot of our countrymen and women are better, and that as we speak of each other and that the work we do, that we be careful how we devalue it and what we say about it. Because what we say about the good work of others is exactly what others will say about the good works of those who are speaking. And I think there's something, when we come into the cut and thrust of the politics in a place like the Parliament, we sometimes forget. I want to just put on record, he's loved, as Big Rob says it, by the persons in the constituency. Even today, I know many of them carry him in his heart. As individuals go for the viewing today, which we are unable to go since we are here, I just want to place that on record and to also place how much we thank the family for having provided, given him the space and time to be able to contribute as much as he did. May his soul rest in peace and light perpetual shine upon him.
Thank you. Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to join in and commend the remarks of the various members who have spoken in celebration and honor of the life of the late Dr. Paul Robertson. My first encounter with him was actually when I was a teenager. And though I was not at all involved in politics or party politics, I happened to be frequenting the house of the late Prime Minister Michael Manley, then in opposition. This was in the early 80s, for other reasons, which I won't go into. And I saw this short, stout man coming there regularly to go and see Mr. Manley. And they would go round to a little building at the back and disappear for hours on end. And that was Dr. Paul Robertson. This would have been around the time he became General Secretary of the party, which I believe was in 1983. I didn't really get to know him then. And in fact, I really only got to know him, I would say, in the last year and a half or 2 years. Because by the time I entered the Senate in 2007 and started to get involved in political life, he was already in the pavilion, so to speak. But I got to know him a bit through his whenever we had election campaigns, he would always make himself available. And because of his tremendous experience and knowledge and commitment, it was inevitable that he would play a role. And various by-elections along the way in the last 10 years, I got to know him through his role as one of the strategists in those by-election campaigns, and my own involvement as one of the operatives on the ground. And he was a lovely person, soft-spoken, polite, gentle soul. To think that he was such a successful General Secretary of the People's National Party is almost counterintuitive given the relatively mild manner that he had. But he came into the party at a time when the party was at a very low ebb in the 1980s, early 1980s, having obviously been involved in the party from before, but came into the role of General Secretary then, when the party was struggling. And within a few years, he had rebuilt the organization along with his colleagues to the point where the party was able to win the local government elections in the mid-80s and ultimately returned to office in 1989. He also served as a vice president of the party in later years, and as we know, a member of Parliament for South East St. Catherine, where he was well loved and respected and very successful. And he'd also served in the Senate. As a minister, he covered several different portfolios: information and culture, development, investment, foreign affairs, and foreign trade, and always acquitted himself well. He was an intellectual with a very able mind and was able to deliver good service and good government for the people of Jamaica. In the last 2 years, he has been a regular source of encouragement and advice to me. Though he lived out in St. Anne, he would call me, or I would call him quite regularly, and discuss issues going on within our party. And he was just very keen to be as helpful as he could. The last time I spoke to him was probably around the time you had that conversation with him. I think late January it must have been. And he sounded so well, and he sounded so encouraging and so enthusiastic. He said that he had boxes in his house that he had not unpacked since he moved there, and now he was ready to unpack them, full of books, and he planned to become more active, and I must always call him for any advice or anything. That he just sounded really, really good and strong. So it came as an immense surprise to hear that he was in hospital. That was a few weeks later, and then to get the very sad news of his passing. He is definitely one of the great icons of our party. He is somebody who served for many decades and was always the kind of person who put the party first over personal ambitions or personalities, and would work with whoever was the leader, whether or not he had supported that person in whatever contest gave rise to that person being appointed or elected to that position. He was a true committed comrade, and more so, he was a true and committed patriot. He believed in service to his country through his chosen vehicle with which he was ideologically aligned, the People's National Party. And I want to just extend condolences to his family, to his friends and colleagues, and say that his memory will live on. And I hope that his career will be appropriately documented for posterity in due course. May his soul rest in peace. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much. Members of the House, please observe there is a condolence book at the front of, right outside the main door entering the chamber. It would be wonderful if all the members go and make their comments and sign the condolence book of Dr. Paul Robertson. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, another of our former colleagues expired within the period under review, and he, Madam Speaker, although not being elevated in his tenure as a minister, was a very strong, powerful, and ardent driver of community development, and his assiduity to purpose and his commitment to the people of West Central St. James is actually legendary and in fact still being referenced even today, nearly 30-odd years after he ceased his representation. Madam Speaker, I speak of Captain Carl Irwin Rhoden, Order of Distinction. Carl Rhoden, and Carlos as we call him, was a warm, committed gentleman, truly dedicated to the people of St. James. Mr. Rhoden served as Member of Parliament for St. James West Central for 2 terms, from 1980 to 83, and again from 83 to 89. Outside of the political arena, Mr. Rhoden had the distinction of being a member of the inaugural fleet of Air Jamaica pilots. He had previously served in the Jamaica Defense Force, attaining the rank of corporal. Mr. Rhoden was also a founding member of the Jamaica Airline Pilots Association. Carlos was also a man who loved the soil, and those of us from St. James would know, not just of Carlos, but the entire Rhoden family, and how keen farmers they were. And he himself showed great interest as an avocado and apiculture farmer in the parish. In 2017, he was awarded the Order of Distinction for his dedication to community development. I remember serving, Madam Speaker, with Carlos in the heady days of the early 80s, and he was one of those very ardent MPs who took the trouble to travel long distance and to be in Parliament on time, a feature which, Madam Speaker, we have sought to emulate in recent times. little concerned about this one today, as we were 9 minutes late, and I urge that we do not repeat that lateness. But, Madam Speaker, Carlos had such an infectious personality. You know, for one thing, he was tall and strong, and you know, and he had all the presence that, you know, masculine strength dictates from time to time. When he walked into an area, you knew that Carlos Rhoden was there. But, you know, he also had a very infectious humor. And he had a way of taking sometimes some serious moments and turning it into a lighter reflection that enabled you to deal with the situations as difficult as it was. And I recall my own experience with him flying together from Kingston to Montego Bay in the days when Air Jamaica was around and that internal flight arrangement was available. And we always have difficulty with turbulence going across the cockpit country. And one evening we were going across and we fell perhaps a couple of feet down, and everybody was very nervous and things. And he sat beside me and I said, "Oh my God, Captain, what's going on?" He says, "Okay, just take it easy. As long as you hear the engine going, you're safe." And it provided another moment for us to understand that the essence of staying suspended in the air and moving is a function of a strong engine operating. And so we learned from him so much in our time as to how to deal with situations such as those. But finally, Madam Speaker, Carlos, even in his days as not being Member of Parliament for West Central St. James, continued to serve the people in that area. And his family lived in Flower Hill, and there are institutions in the parish, and the member from West Central is here and no doubt would have our reflections of her own. But I'd love to just say to his family, and it's a large family in the parish, perhaps one of the most substantial families in St. James, that we do honor and respect his contribution and service to the people of the parish and the Parliament of our land. And may his soul rest in peace, and may light perpetual shine on him. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thanks, House Leader.
May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Malahuford.
I should like to put on the record my own condolence as member of the great constituency of St. James West Central, in which Mr. Rhoden served as a predecessor in the office. To put on record my condolence to the family, and just to say that he is a large man in the constituency who is regarded for his dedication and service to the people of St. James West Central and also Western Jamaica. He served well and faithfully in the Jamaica Labour Party, and his family can be justly proud that he has made a good contribution to the building of nation. May his soul rest in peace.
Madam Speaker, I would not like to be like the reputed politician who went to a funeral and spoke for nearly 2 hours, and then at the end said he did not know the deceased. I did not know the former Member of Parliament. I've heard of him, obviously, and I think in the spirit of what we've been doing today, that anyone who has had the privilege to serve the people of Jamaica in this honourable house and in other areas, but certainly speaking for this house, that their contribution, their service, recognised and honoured. And I'd like to join the Member of Parliament for West Central in wishing and paying condolences to the family and wishing them well. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
So, Madam Speaker, it is customary, of course, that this honourable House would send written condolences to the family, and no doubt to include the tributes that have been paid here today. And just by way of information, Madam Speaker, that an official funeral has been accorded to the former Minister, Dr. Paul Robertson, and will be on March 12th. at the University Chapel at 1 p.m. The leader of the opposition business did indicate the limitations, but I think that our hearts and soul could be there with him in the phrase of the time, being present apart. May his soul rest in peace.
Members of the House, would we all rise for 1 more minute of silence in honor of our dearly departed former members. May their souls rest in peace. You may be seated. So we will recommit later. Statement by ministers. We will move to announce. House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the intention today is to proceed with the normal arrangements of the House, but to have a recommittal at a later stage on statement by ministers, so as to allow the Minister of Health to make a statement and also to deal with other matters relating to public business. But, Madam Speaker, that we would proceed through the normal run and have the Minister who is in the wings, a long wings, a big wing that perhaps has no end. The member from Southeast, St. Andrew, and opposition spokesman on finance to speak ahead of the rest of the program. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, House Leader. Announcements?
Laid on the table of the House today are the following. Ministry Paper number 25 of 2022 and Annual Report of the Public Accountancy Board for the year 2020-2021. The National Minimum Wage Amendment Order 2022 and its resolution, and the Minimum Wage Industrial Security Guards Announcement Order 2022 and its resolution. Both of these come under the National Minimum Wage Act. Appropriation account for Head 1000, Office of His Excellency the Governor General and Staff for the year 2016-2017. And there are 5 reports from the Public Administration and Appropriation Committee, 1 on its deliberations on the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development regarding reports of financial and contractual irregularities at the Manchester, Hanover, and Westmoreland municipal corporations. 2 on its deliberations on the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce. 3 on its deliberations on the impact of the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic on the tourism sector. 4 on its deliberations on the conflict resolution initiatives of the Ministry of Justice. And 5 on its deliberations with the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries on the coronavirus COVID-19 measures to revive this sector. 5. Also, there are 5 reports from the Regulations Committee of the House of Representatives on 1. Its deliberations on the Radio and Telegraph Control Private Radio Service Amendment Regulation 2022. 2. Its deliberations on the Radio and Telegraph Control Maritime Mobile Radio Service Amendment Regulations 2022. 3. On its deliberation on the Radio and Telegraph Control Citizen Band Radio Service Amendment Regulations 2022. 4. On its deliberations on the Radio and Telegraph Control Amateur Radio Service Amendment Regulations 2022. And 5. On its deliberations on the Radio and Telegraph Control Radio Operators and Technicians Amendment Regulations 2022.
Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, reports from committees.
Madam Speaker.
Member Whittle. Member Whittle.
Madam Speaker.
House Leader.
Might I intervene? Madam Speaker, there are lengthy items on the agenda. The order paper suggests that we be kind to the opposition spokesman on finance, and so I ask that we suspend these other areas in favor of making the member gets his opportunity to speak, and we will take them afterwards, Madam Speaker. May it please you.
Absolutely. Notices of motions given orally, questions and answers to questions. Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the House. Motions for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained. Public business.
Madam Speaker, at this point in public business, I move for the continuation of the debate, the financial debate on the budget and the appropriations expenditure as tabled. We had a very inspiring presentation from the Minister of Finance on Tuesday. And today, Madam Speaker, I invite you to have the presentation from the member from St. Andrew Southeastern, Mr. Julian Robinson. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Mr. Julian Robinson, Opposition Spokesman on Finance and the Public Service.
Madam Speaker, I am honored and humbled to rise before this honorable House to deliver the opposition's reply to the budget. I stand here today with gratitude to the Almighty for his many blessings and his hand of guidance and protection in difficult and challenging times. I want to thank my family for their consistent support and love, which enables me to serve in this House. My wife, Mariam, my children, PJ and Amara, are my rocks. I've been blessed, Madam Speaker, to have wonderfully supportive parents who instilled in me a sense of public service and a duty of care for those less fortunate than myself. My father is always by my side. From my days playing football and cricket as a schoolboy to now, from the distance of The Hague. For my mother, who looks down from above, I draw inspiration from her favorite Bible verse, Psalm 27, verse 1. The Lord is my light and salvation, whom shall I fear? Madam Speaker, it has been my honor to represent the citizens of Southeast St. Andrew, who have elected me on 3 consecutive occasions to represent their interests. I continue to be humbled by the responsibility they have charged me with, and I will continue to represent them with dignity, integrity, accountability, and transparency. I thank the constituency team, and many of them are here, whose commitment, dedication, and service has enabled me to stand here today. I also recognize with gratitude the members, workers, and delegates of the People's National Party, my colleague members of Parliament in this House on both sides, and specifically my party president, Mark Golding, for the confidence reposed in me. And Madam Speaker, when the toil is heavy and the campaign is long, I soldier on, inspired by the sacrifices of the Jamaican worker, the nurses, doctors, and other healthcare workers who risk life and health to keep Jamaica safe during COVID, our police officers and soldiers who protect us from evil, our teachers, our entrepreneurs and business people who find ways to make it happen even in the most adverse conditions. Indeed, Madam Speaker, all the people who work, whether you sign in or run your hustle, I see you, I respect you, I thank you. Madam Speaker, my contribution to this budget debate is within the context of a Jamaica that is at a critical moment in our own story and in the story of the world. This year marks 60 years as an independent nation, our Diamond Jubilee. Never have we faced as many complex challenges globally and locally. But, Madam Speaker, never have we had so many opportunities made available to us as a nation to change course and seriously pursue the growth that has eluded us for decades. There is a Chinese character that has a double meaning, crisis and opportunity. This moment in our history represents both. What is important is how we move forward. To navigate our way through the world we live in today, to position our people to fully achieve their potential, and to achieve the elusive growth we so need and desire, we as Jamaicans need to make some serious decisions about where we are going. We have 60 years of charting our own path to learn from our own mistakes and from others. We now have to decide. Is it okay that 50% of school leavers can barely read? There are the haves, those students who could afford to access education online, and the have-nots, the vast majority who neither had device nor internet access. Are we satisfied with a Jamaica in which COVID has amplified those educational inequalities? How long can our nation survive in a rapidly digitizing global economy without investing in our people or providing the resources to enable and empower digital entrepreneurs? Are we satisfied with using our athletic success, our reggae and dancehall music, indeed our entire cultural heritage, as what I would term a poppy show, enough to play for tourists and for advertisements, but not important enough to make serious investments in? How long do we plan to cast off dancehall culture, only to hug up and celebrate individual successes when they are recognized abroad? Are we fine cowering in fear in our homes, locked behind grill gates, or crouching under the bed to duck gunshots? Is it okay that law-abiding citizens are paralyzed by the fear of crime and violence, and that our murders continue to climb? Is a Jamaica where corruption and mismanagement going unpunished, where there's unequal treatment of the powerful and well-connected versus the poor under the law, really a place where we want to live, work, raise families, and do business? Are we satisfied with being a nation where there is significant wealth in the hands of a few, but where the majority struggle each day to make ends meet? Madam Speaker, the challenge for us as leaders today is clear. How do we narrow the gap, and how do we uplift the majority of our people? Madam Speaker, the Jamaica we all want to live in can exist, but it takes inspired, creative, honest, and accountable leadership with policies that are people-centric, progressive, and just. Madam Speaker, when the budget documents were tabled in February, I raised questions about the credibility of the assumptions in the budget document. I listened carefully to the minister 2 days ago to see if he would make any adjustments to these assumptions. He did not. I therefore have to question the assumptions on which this budget is based. Madam Speaker, a budget is an income and expenditure plan which is based on a set of assumptions. Meeting the targets outlined in the budget depends on these assumptions. When the budget assumptions are not in sync with the local and international environment, they amount to unrealistic promises which cannot be kept, which will lead to more poverty and frustration for ordinary people. When the minister presented his budget on Tuesday, there was a full-fledged conflict in the Ukraine. Will the minister come to us in a couple of months with a supplementary budget? And why not just make the adjustments now so that we can anticipate the challenges that we will face in a couple of weeks? Madam Speaker, the budget as laid out by the minister may balance the books, but it will do so on the backs of the Jamaican people. As an example of what I would consider one of the questionable assumptions, the oil price forecast on which this current budget is based. The minister presented a budget based on an oil price of US $67.50 per barrel, a figure which I would consider unrealistic even before we had the full-fledged conflict between Russia and the Ukraine. In fact, at the time last month when the budget was tabled, oil was trading somewhere close to $90 per barrel due to the demand and supply imbalances as the global economy recovered from COVID-19. Madam Speaker, just this week, the West Texas Intermediary traded at $123 per barrel. And the British benchmark, North Sea Crude, traded at also $123, the highest prices in 10 years. And now we have the United States instituting a ban on Russian oil and gas. These prices, high prices, are not forecast to go down swiftly either. There are contracts which have oil trading as high as $99 as at December 2022. Globally, Madam Speaker, Russia is the third largest oil producer and the largest oil exporter, producing some 11 to 12% of the world's global oil output. A 1% drop in output leads to a 5% increase in the price of the precious commodity. Now, last year, when the government projected oil for the fiscal year 21-22, they projected $45 per barrel. Based on the government's own estimates, oil will end up at $73 per barrel. This is more than 60% higher than the amount which was projected. But of note, the projection for the new fiscal year of $67.50 is lower than the estimate which the current fiscal year will end up at, which is $73. Madam Speaker, given the global challenges that we face, this simply does not make sense. The minister needs to explain the variance between the ministry's own projection of $67.50 and Petrojam's projection of $79.36 in their public bodies document, both of which were tabled in the House on February 10th. In any event, Madam Speaker, while oil prices may not remain as elevated now for the entire fiscal year, it is highly unlikely that these prices will fall to the average of $67.50 during the upcoming fiscal year. Madam Speaker, oil has a snowballing effect on all prices in an energy-intensive local and international environment. And as a result, if you get the oil price forecast wrong, the inflation forecast is also going to be wrong. And higher than projected oil prices will have a negative impact on our trade and current account deficits. While the higher oil prices will allow the government to collect more revenues from the taxes on petroleum products, the inflationary impact of higher oil prices on businesses and consumers will result in a fall in real disposable income. Therefore, businesses and consumers will have less money to buy other goods and services after paying their light bill, their gas bill, and their water bills. Getting the inflation target wrong means that the country will have to find more money to service debt. And I believe that the projection of 5% for next fiscal year is way off target. Our inflation rate point to point was in January at 9.7% before the estimates were tabled. And when you look at the rates of our major trading partners, they are also at record high levels. The US, 7.5%, the UK, 5.4%, the EU, 5.1%, and Canada, 5.1%. The conflict in the Ukraine and the accompanying sanctions are going to increase the global supply chain bottlenecks, and that in conjunction with higher energy prices will continue to drive inflation higher for most of this year. Jamaica's debt is extremely sensitive to changes in both the exchange rate as well as changes in our interest rates. And this is amply demonstrated in the medium-term debt management strategy document, which was tabled in the House last month. Madam Speaker, that document tells us that a 1% decrease or depreciation in the exchange rate leads to a $13.6 billion addition to the debt and $673 million to the interest costs, which results in a total increase of $14.3 billion. A 1% increase in interest rates adds $2.4 billion to the cost of servicing domestic debt and $4.1 billion to the cost of servicing external debt, resulting in a total cost of $6.5 billion. What this means is that if these increases take place, this money will have to be found from the budget. It means either a reduction in planned expenditures or reallocation of monies from other activities. The debt management strategy also explains the country's vulnerability to changes in the exchange rates and interest rates, and why the central bank's current policy of increasing interest rates to contain inflation will lead to higher than program debt servicing charges, which cannot be absorbed by the budget. When this question arose at Standing Finance Committee, the Minister indicated that there is space to treat with this. I'm not sure where the space is. I don't know if it is in the contingency budget or where it will come from, or whether we anticipate that the higher revenues we'll earn as a result of the high oil prices and inflation will offset these additional debt servicing charges. Higher than projected oil prices will also create greater demand for foreign exchange, as more money will be required to purchase the same quantities of oil. This is likely to create more pressure in our foreign exchange market, which will have an inflationary impact if there is depreciation. Madam Speaker, in an attempt to moderate inflation, the Bank of Jamaica has raised interest rates 4 times since last year. This has moved interest rates from a low of 0.5% in September last year to 4% in February this year, an increase of 350 basis points. The BOJ has signaled its intention to continue to use monetary policy and interest rates to bring back inflation down to the 4 to 6% range. It is expected, therefore, that if inflation remains above the target range, the Bank of Jamaica will continue to raise interest rates. While I focused on the impact of the increased rates on debt servicing charges and the budget, I have to bring to your attention the impact on economic activity. While interest rates increases don't have an immediate impact because it takes probably 2 to 3 quarters to work through the banking system, these interest rate increases are going to push up the cost of credit in our economy and will likely dampen economic activity and threaten the government's own growth projections. On the issue of the exchange rate, we acknowledge that there's been some appreciation in recent times and that there is some stability as the Bank of Jamaica has heavily intervened in the foreign exchange market. They have pumped over $300 million US since the beginning of calendar year 2022. As the Minister acknowledged and the Governor, these interventions and the types of large interventions are clearly unsustainable. And there is the potential that once these interventions cease, that there will be more pressures in the foreign exchange market. Madam Speaker, given the change in realities of the local and international environment, as well as the additional burden that will be faced by the Jamaican people as a result of the conflict in the Ukraine, we are recommending that the government recrafts the budget to meet these realities. Madam Speaker, I know a counter-argument will be that the negative impact of the crisis will be offset by higher revenues. Our primary surplus and fiscal balance will benefit, but the people, Madam Speaker, the people will ultimately pay the price. The additional revenues are not going into people's pockets. They will offset the increased debt servicing charges, and we will benefit from higher than projected inflation and the possibility of depreciation. So those things will bring in more revenues, but those monies are coming out of the pockets of Jamaicans. Madam Speaker, as our former Prime Minister, the Most Honourable Portia Simpson Miller, would say, the budget is not just about balancing the books, but also about balancing people's lives. And Madam Speaker, the budget as currently crafted will not balance the lives of the Jamaican people. Madam Speaker, having spent the last 2 years battling the COVID pandemic, our country has been experiencing a cost of living crisis, which is set to become worse based on the situation in the Ukraine. The cost of living crisis is the result of significant increases in the prices of basic food items, increases in the cost of gasoline and electricity, and increases in taxi fares in an environment where many persons have not recovered fully from COVID. Madam Speaker, many Jamaicans are struggling and suffering. Madam Speaker, I'm here to deliver a message to the Minister. The price of food items are just too high, and people are feeling it and are hungry. Madam Speaker, I'm going to share data on price increases of basic food items over the last 12 months. Now, when I came last year, I made a similar presentation, and my colleague, the Minister, took me to task because I used data from in the street, from retailers, and not official government data. This year, I have the official government data. I have the information from the CAC. But, Madam Speaker, whether the data is from the street or whether the data is from the CAC, the data says the same things. Food prices are high and people are suffering. While the data from the government indicates that our annual inflation rate will be somewhere in the region of possibly 8 to 9%, consumers are faced with increases significantly higher than that. Let's consider some basic food items, and I'm just talking about the last year, January 21 to January 22. And the Consumer Affairs Commission has shown that many food items have increased as much as up to 40%. And Madam Speaker, I want to share this data with the House and with the country. Madam Speaker, if we take hard dough bread as one of the items, that has gone up by 22% in the 1 year. Chicken, gone up by 26%. Cooking oil by 44%. Corned beef by 36%. Counter flour by 32%. And this is January 2021 to January 2022. This is just 1 year. Let's look at some other items. Sugar, a 7% increase. Saltfish, 16%. Mackerel, 17%. Milk powder, 9%. And rice, 38%. Rice, 38%. Huh? So, Madam Speaker, what we are looking at, Madam Speaker, are what you consider the basic food items which most Jamaicans have to consume, and particularly individuals who are in the lower socioeconomic groups. And Madam Speaker, you will notice I don't have chicken back on this because the CAC doesn't track the prices of chicken back. But that is also a protein which has increased significantly as well. Madam Speaker, when we look at these increases, how do we expect people who earn the least to do the most basic things for their survival, which is to eat? How do we expect working people to maintain their health and their dignity when they can't afford to feed themselves and their families? How will children learn? Madam Speaker, the government needs to narrow the gap and uplift our people. There are simply too many people who are struggling to make ends meet. Last year, Madam Speaker, I spoke about food poverty. That reality is being faced by many of our people. And I want to just emphasize, these prices are January 2022. In the last 2 months, so it wouldn't have captured, for example, the further increases in chicken, the increase in flour, and other items that have increased since January, because the survey in January would have picked up from December prices. So even these prices, as of today's date, would be higher and will continue to climb. Madam Speaker, the Russia and the Ukraine together account for 25% of the world's wheat production. So while we focus on oil, as we should, and the impact of oil, they combine a quarter of the world's wheat production. So flour is going to go up more, which means that bread going to go up, bulla, crackers, dumpling, patty, which used to be poor people food, is now $220 for a patty. And there was a time when you could say you could have buy 2 patty and a box drink as poor people food. You can't do it anymore. In fact, the 2 patty and a box drink, you might as well buy a box food. But last year, you could have probably buy, the coffin box. This year is only the burger box you can buy. The reality, Madam Speaker, is that you are getting less and less as the inflation impacts the Jamaican people. Madam Speaker, 2 days ago, the minister made a dramatic announcement. No new taxes. No new taxes. The reality, however, Madam Speaker, is that the government doesn't need to impose any new taxes because it will be collecting a lot more taxes as oil prices rise and inflation skyrockets. To the ordinary Jamaican, the effect of the increases in everything from food to electricity to gas at the pump feel the same way as a new tax. So if you call it maca or you call it prickle, it'll go joke you the same way. Or the same joke. It's the same joke. As oil prices rise, the government collects more taxes. The ad valorem tax is a variable rate tax, which means it moves with the price of gas. It's calculated as 10% of the ex-refinery price plus the special consumption tax. So a higher gas price, so as gas prices increase, there are more taxes that will go into the coffers of the government. And since the budget is based on oil at $67.50, the government will earn a windfall in revenue as oil prices remain above that figure. But, Madam Speaker, it is the poor, the most vulnerable, the working class, and the middle class from whom these taxes are going to be sucked out. In 2019, the minister said inflation is the worst tax on the people, and we agree with him. Inflation is the most cruel tax because it affects our fixed income earners. But as inflation rises, the government collects more revenue. And I want to use, Madam Speaker, a simple example to illustrate this point. Let's assume this pen cost $100 last year. If you take the GCT on it, the GCT collection to the minister would have been $15. If the same pen increases to $150 this year, the collection to the minister is no longer $15, but $22.50. 15% of $150. So the minister would collect an additional $7.50 in GCT on this item alone, just because of inflation. So, Madam Speaker, if we take this example across the wide range of goods and services, we can see how the government will collect significantly more in tax revenues without the need to introduce any new measures. So whether it's maca or prickle, it joke you the same exact way. Madam Speaker, part of the reason these increases hurt so much is that while everything has gone up, wages and salaries have by and large remained the same. And generally when they go up, they are not going up at the same pace to keep up with the rate of inflation. For 4 years, our lowest paid workers in Jamaica, the helpers, the auxiliary workers, security guards, and so on, waited patiently for an increase in the minimum wage. The increase to $9,000 is far from what it needs to be. In fact, I would say inflation has already eaten out that increase. On this point, Madam Speaker, I know I have a friend across the aisle in the member from Northeast Manchester, and I don't know if he's hearing me. But in 2015, when he was on this side, he promised that he would increase the minimum wage to $5,000 US a year, which works out to be 15,000 Jamaican dollars per month. He promised if his party became government, he would do so. Manayard. But when Manayard got to Hero Circle, he seemed to have forgotten that commitment because there was no increase in minimum wage. And Madam Speaker, we have gone an extended period of time without that increase. Madam Speaker, my constituent, and to maintain her dignity, I'll call her Sharon. She's a single mother of 2 working as a domestic helper. She earns $10,000 per week, which is above the new minimum wage. And she still can't make ends meet. And I want to share with you what Sharon's weekly bills are. She spends $2,000 a week on bus and taxi fare to get to and from work for herself. For her children, she gives $2,000 a week for them to get to school. She has to give another $2,000 to the children for their lunch money. She spent $1,000 for phone credit and internet. She spent $3,000 on food, $1,000 for electricity, and $2,500 for rent. Madam Speaker, that is $13,500. So she have a deficit. So, Madam Speaker, when you take, Madam Speaker, there are many Sharons. There are Sharons in my constituency.
Time for members speaking has expired. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the member's time be extended sufficiently for him to complete his presentation. May I please invoke?
Member Robinson.
Madam Speaker, there are many Sharons who work every day to just eke out a living. And even with the minimum wage increase, they can't survive. They try their best. Because if you take the $2,000 that she gives her children, that can't buy nothing. A patty alone is $220. But this is the reality of a vast majority of Jamaicans. So how we expect them to pay for food, rent, water, light, I don't even reach medication yet, on $9,000 a week. Madam Speaker, to put $9,000 in perspective, $9,000 could not buy one single bottle of the rosé champagne that a minister, a councillor, and their friends were drinking on the No Movement Day. at that hotel in New Kingston. Not one buckle of that champagne. And they weren't drinking one buckle. They were drinking about 5 or 6. But our new minimum wage couldn't buy one buckle of that rosé champagne. Madam Speaker, $9,000 per week can neither address food poverty nor education inequality. It is a vicious cycle. On behalf of the workers of Jamaica, the opposition is calling for an increase in the minimum wage to $12,000 per week, which we believe would better allow Sharon and others like her to meet their basic needs. Now, Madam Speaker, I know the pushback. What about the employers? There are people who employ minimum wage earners, and their salaries have been adjusted. And I understand that, and that's a genuine concern. But, Madam Speaker, we may have to look at how we reorder some of our domestic arrangements. So if you have a domestic helper who works 5 days a week, you may have to reduce that to 4. And you allow her a day to go and work somewhere else, where she can earn some more money. Because the $9,000 simply can't allow her to take care of her basic needs. Further to that, Madam Speaker, we want to move away from the concept of a minimum wage to look at a livable wage. And we believe this should be done rooted in economic analysis, looking at the annual price movements, the inflation rate, and a determination of the basket of goods and services consumed by our lowest earners. Madam Speaker, we believe this should be done on an annual basis. Annual basis to protect the most vulnerable workers against the ravages of inflation. So, Madam Speaker, when the minister spoke, he announced his intention to provide some support to families who were feeling the effects of the increased prices. I think it was $200 million to families who were not on PATH or any other program, $250 million in care packages, and another $250 million later on in the year. Madam Speaker, while any relief is welcome, we view this as woefully inadequate to address the nature and the scale of the suffering which exists. And I want to break down what $10,000 means. In Sharon's case, the $10,000 cannot even keep her and her family fed, going to school and going to work, or even to eat properly for 1 week. So while we appreciate, and I know the families will appreciate some assistance, really it will not go very far. And when we look at the totality of the $700 million, that accounts, Madam Speaker, to about 0.03 of 1% of GDP. Not 0.3%, 0.03 of 1%. It is simply not enough. Madam Speaker, one-off payments are only part of the solution. We have to narrow the gap and uplift our people. Madam Speaker, as we speak about salaries and wages, I'd like to focus for a moment on the matter of the public sector compensation. The opposition has always supported the call of the trade unions for a review of the compensation structure in the public service. And this process actually started when we were in office. The truth is, Madam Speaker, over successive administrations, the workers of Jamaica have always been called on to bear the brunt when we have had to make sacrifices. Our teachers, our police, nurses, doctors, civil servants, firefighters, and auxiliary workers have been called upon to hold strain. All of us. Our faithful and hardworking public servants have done so over and over again, but with one caveat. They have demanded a review of their compensation in the public sector. Now, having waited, we support these workers' rights to an improved compensation package. We on this side look forward to the unions and the government signing off on a new agreement effective April 1st this year. And we expect, as our wage bill has increased, we expect with a 19% increase in our public sector wage bill that there will be equity for all workers. to attract and retain the most competent and talented people necessary for an efficient public service, capable of contributing to growing our GDP, those positions at the top deserve appropriate increases. However, those lower paid workers, such as our security guards, our groundsmen, the women who work in school canteens, the porters, the auxiliary workers, the civilian workers in the JDF and the JCF, and our very own employees in this parliament, such as our orderlies, are also deserving of equity when these increases take place. We await the details from the minister to see if the wage scales do justice to them. Like others, Madam Speaker, we are concerned that we have breached the 9% wage to GDP rule. But we support the government's public sector compensation review. And we are even more committed and will make recommendations about how we believe we can grow the economy so that we can bring GDP back up so that we can get back to the 9%. Madam Speaker, we understand the value of and importance of fiscal rules as our last administration started the process of enacting these rules to ensure fiscal discipline and sustainability. Again, we support the increased compensation to our hard-working and committed public sector workers, and including those in our public bodies too, whom the minister says will be dealt with at a later stage. But, Madam Speaker, before I move on from public sector compensation, I am making a plea for an urgent review of the approach to workers in the public sector who are doing permanent jobs but are restrained by fixed-term contracts, many of which are abusive and exploitative. Contract work, that's what I'm talking about. Why deny these workers the chance to earn a pension after years of loyal service? And to be clear, I'm not seeking to cast any blame on any administration, because this is something that has existed for a long time. But I believe we have to recognize it and to do something about it. Madam Minister, I don't know if you can, when you respond, indicate how many public sector workers fall into the category of being contract workers, meaning they don't have a permanent job and they have no entitlement. And Madam Speaker, I want to give you a case of an employee in a public body who has been there for 18 years. And every year he gets a one-year contract for 18 years. Now, there are very few people who stay at any job for 18 years. But when he leaves that job, he has nothing to get. Him don't have no gratuity, him don't have no pension. And ultimately, unless he has family support, he will become a burden to the state. And there are many others like that. So, Minister, you mentioned the pension scheme review to reduce the number of years it takes to qualify and for pensions to become, that's private pension. But I ask you, pay particular attention to the contract workers. We have to make the adjustment. If we're going to bear the pain of increasing our wage to GDP above that level, let us use the opportunity to deal particularly with those workers at the lower end of the scale and ensure that there is equity. Madam Speaker, we are committed to the public sector reform. We welcome the move to rationalize the various pay levels, but we must not leave any of our dedicated and hardworking public servants behind. Government policy, Madam Speaker, must narrow the gap and uplift our people. Shifting gears, Madam Speaker, I'd like to speak briefly on the matter of bank fees. And I want to start by acknowledging the consistent, persistent, and tireless advocacy on this issue by the member from South St. Catherine. Madam Speaker, in 2018, my colleague Member of Parliament Fitz Jackson tabled a private member's motion seeking to amend the Banking Services Act to protect customers against high bank fees. At the time, every member of Parliament on that side voted against it, and the bill died in the House. For the average bank customer, Madam Speaker, it is painful for them when them say the bank near out the little money in them savings. Yes. Madam Speaker, in recent times, we heard the Prime Minister, we heard the Minister of Finance, we heard the Minister of Justice speak out strongly against banks that had proposed increases in their fees. Most curiously, Madam Speaker, the Jamaica Labour Party wrote to the Jamaica Labour Party asking the Jamaica Labour Party to do something about these bank fees. When I saw the press release, one of the words in that press release was unconscionable. So when the JLP wrote to the JLP asking the JLP to take action on bank fees, I expected the JLP to deliver a response which would tackle the problem. But what the minister announced 2 days ago simply does not address the scale of the problem.
Just deal with existing accounts at all.
Madam Speaker, it may be one part of the remedy, but what was announced does not address the hundreds of thousands of existing customers who would not be in the 100,000 accounts that the minister spoke about. What about those customers? Should they be left to the mercies of financial institutions? What are we doing to protect those customers? So while what the minister announced may be a start for financial inclusion, we still have to deal with the fundamental issue. The fundamental issue is that bank customers, and we could probably ask ourselves in this house, how many of us know what the charges on our bank accounts are? Genuinely. You may be the exception. But there are very few. Bank charges are generally hidden. They might be in the fine print. If they're on the website, they are in a place that is not easily found. So, Madam Speaker, we still have to address the issue of the protection of bank customers. Now, I know the minister said he doesn't support what he calls price fixing. But the member from South St. Catherine retabled his bill in October 2020. Why have we not brought this bill back to the House so that it can be subject to a full debate and discussion? I mean, even if you don't support a clause or a part of the bill, it can't be that we leave this bill hopefully to die when the issue of bank fees remains a big one for the majority of bank customers. So, House Leader, I'm saying to you with responsibility for the House, bring back the bill, make we discuss it, make we debate it. If you have an issue with a clause, say what the issue is. But let us not discard what the member has spent a lot of time and effort putting together to advance the interest and protection of the Jamaican customer. Madam Speaker, we must always narrow the gap and uplift our people. Madam Speaker, directly related to the cost of living crisis is the matter of gas prices. Over the last year alone, gas prices have increased by over 60% in the last year. 60% in the last year. This has put a significant burden on not just the traveling public, but on everybody, as businesses are faced with increased costs and have had to pass these on to their customers. Between January 7th last year and February 10th this year, and I use February 10th because that's the date the documents were tabled in the House, the ex-refinery price of 87 octane has moved from $112 January 7, 2021 to $177 February 10, 2022, 59%. Wow. 90 has moved from $118 January last year to $182 February last month. 59% increase. And this is ex-refinery. Diesel has moved from $113 January 7th to $179 February 10th, 58%. Now, Madam Speaker, if I include the recent increases since February 10th, the total increase over a 12-month period would be 65%. And this is ex-refinery, which means it doesn't include what dealers and the companies mark up. Doesn't include that. But for ease of comparison, I used what Petrojam gave. Madam Speaker, as we know, when the price goes up, it goes up in dollars. But when it comes down in cents. And Madam Speaker, yesterday, it went up by $4.50. And what is happening now with the psyche of our people, we all wait on a Wednesday to hear what the price increase is. And then when the prices increase, there's a rush on every gas station, as there was yesterday. Madam Speaker, we are in a situation where gas price inflation is causing significant pressures on the population, hardships, and suffering. Madam Speaker, I acknowledge that the most significant contributor to the price of gas is the price of crude oil, which we don't have any control over. But, Madam Speaker, local taxes also play a critical role. Many Jamaicans consumers are not aware of this, but a large percentage of the price of petroleum products is made up of taxes. And there are three kinds of taxes that are levied on petroleum products. There's a special consumption tax, which for 87, 90 and unleaded is roughly $37 per litre. You have a little variation. You have the hedge tax, which is rolled into the ex-refinery at $7 per litre. And then you have the ad valorem, which is 10% of the ex-refinery plus the SCT. So while the hedge tax and the SCT are fixed taxes, the ad valorem is a variable one. So when the price of oil goes up, so does the amount of money the government takes in from these taxes. So, for example, if the price of 87-octane gas is $200 per litre, a motorist pays approximately $65 in gas taxes for all the taxes. $65. So at $200 per litre, you're paying $65. So let's take the example of Henry. Henry running taxi from Papine to Halfway Tree. He's on that route. He drives a Pro Box, and it costs him $11,000 each time he fill up the Pro Box, because the Pro Box is about 55 litres. I know, but I just going, him do it little, but I'm going to give you the example when him fill up the tank. Of the $11,000 to fill up his tank, Henry pays $3,500 in taxes. So when the minister said there are no new taxes and there are no new measures, we need to understand that Henry and the thousands of consumers are paying more and more taxes as the price of gas goes up. And this goes into the government coffers. Madam Speaker, the government has announced an allocation of $2 billion to help the Henrys of this world.
Out of 99 billion of new taxes.
And we look forward to hearing the details to ensure that there will be equity in how these sums are applied. But, Madam Speaker, I want to make an appeal, not just for the Henrys of this world. There are a lot of people, the teachers, the nurses, not just the most vulnerable, but our middle class, or people who work from paycheck to paycheck. They are feeling it too. So we have to look, and the minister said he will come back to us and indicate what mechanism will be used to offer this assistance. But in doing so, it's not just who drive SUV. It's a whole heap of people in the middle who feel in it. Teachers, civil servants, nurses, they are struggling. So let's not assume because you have a SUV, you're good. The people below that are struggling. Madam Speaker, the government collects somewhere between, and the minister can confirm it, somewhere between $6 to $7 billion, $6 to 7, not 67, $6 to $7 billion annually from the hedge tax. We are calling, Madam Speaker, on the government to allocate the full amount that it collects from the hedge tax and put that in relief for those who are suffering from high gas prices. Not just the $2 billion. The full amount that is collected from the hedge, let us use it to alleviate the pressures that so many in our population are facing. Madam Speaker, we have to narrow the gap and we have to uplift our people.
Don't forget about prosperity.
Madam Speaker,
It's reform and ridiculousness.
in terms of energy, this government has been slow in running its leg of the relay race and has dropped the baton on several issues. The energy portfolio has seen a revolving door of ministers, and we are behind in our quest to diversify our energy mix. Jamaica finds itself at the mercy of international currents, where every step forward towards economic growth is stymied by the threat of fiscal destabilization due to high energy costs. When we left office in 2016, we were on track to achieving a very ambitious target that we had set of having 20% of our energy mix from renewables and 30% by the year 2030. The Prime Minister has expressed a desire for that to move to 50% by 2030, not just 30. But, Madam Speaker, vision without execution is mere hallucination. Vision without execution is mere hallucination. When we left office, Madam Speaker, we had started a request for a proposal to identify investors for 115 megawatts of renewable energy. Since then, Madam Speaker, no RFP has been issued. Wow. There is an RFP to be executed by the generation procurement entity in the Ministry of Energy, coming out of the integrated resource plan. But, Madam Speaker, the RFP is yet to be issued. And, Madam Speaker, we don't have time. We need to issue this RFP because there's going to be a lag between the procurement and the implementation of this project, which may be possibly 2 years or 3, right? Madam Speaker, I also want to raise concern about the status of our public sector energy efficiency and conservation program. We started this program, it was funded by the IDB, and it was meant to, and I believe at the time it was about $30 million. We replaced the old air conditioners, we reduced the heat load on the roofs, we did the installation of solar panels, replaced LEDs, and this was supposed to realize significant reduction in consumption for the public sector, because the public sector is one of the largest consumers of electricity. Madam Speaker, we need an update on the status of this project. Where are we? Have we accomplished the goals that were set out when the project started? My understanding is it has stalled, and I don't know why it has stalled, but it is needed more now than any other time in our history. We need an update. The Minister of Energy is not here, but he needs to provide the country with an update. By now, Madam Speaker, we must all recognize that the dual problem of our dependency on oil and the negative impact on the By now, we must all recognize the dual problem of our dependency on oil and the negative effects on our economy and climate. It is imperative, therefore, that the government accelerates policies and programs that reduce our dependency on oil and promote energy efficiency. This is necessary to reduce our energy bill while promoting the use of cleaner energy solutions. Jamaica gave a commitment at COP26 on the concrete actions it would take to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We also updated our nationally determined contributions in June 2020 with a focus on the energy sector. Madam Speaker, I welcome the Minister's announcement 2 days ago to reduce the duties on electric vehicles to 10%. But, Madam Speaker, we have to go much further and much deeper than that. It is a good start. We need to remove the taxes on all energy efficiency products.
That's right.
All of them. I know many of them are zero rated already. I know that. But there are, for example, the solar batteries, which are used to power solar operations. That is a sore point. And that would make a big difference in the ability of persons to afford these solutions. Madam Speaker, there is a line of funding at the DBJ for individuals to access energy efficiency products, but it don't seem to be well known. There is a business line that is more well known, but the individual one is not well known. And as such, the take-up has been very low. We have to promote it. We have to provide incentives for people who want to put in solar water heater and other solar type initiatives, or just to reduce their own energy consumption. We need to focus on developing the infrastructure across the country to facilitate the installation of charging stations, not just at a commercial level, but also at an individual level. And we must ensure that we align the fiscal regime with policies, plans, and programs so that the country prepares the 2050 long-term emissions reduction and climate resilience strategy for Jamaica under the Climate Action Enhancement Package. Madam Speaker, I want to turn my attention to the proposal by the government to divest itself of the 20% shares in JPS. We are opposed to this proposal. We believe that the JPS is a critical infrastructure and a strategic asset for the country, which is essential for the proper functioning of our society and our economy. The government should retain its stake so that it can have a voice at the table. To be clear, so that we're not misunderstood, we're not against general divestment of government assets. That's not the issue here. And the government has proposed other assets for divestment. We don't take any issue with that. But we believe JPS is different. It is strategic. And given the impact of energy costs on business competitiveness and the cost of living for Jamaica, we believe it's imperative that the government has a seat at the table and has a voice. Madam Speaker, we also believe at this particular time, with oil prices at $120 per barrel, that we are facing an energy crisis, and it requires the active involvement of the government as a shareholder in a strategic and critical asset such as the JPS. Madam Speaker, there are other reasons why we oppose the divestment. The divestment seems to be motivated simply by a desire to raise revenues to meet some general budgetary activities. And there doesn't seem to be any strategic intent in that divestment. Madam Speaker, we are also concerned about how a fully privatized entity would handle the issue of electricity theft, which accounts for about 20% of JPS losses, and for which paying customers pay for those losses. Now, Madam Speaker, to be clear, the issue of electricity theft is not a problem JPS can resolve by itself. Cannot. It will require the active involvement of the government to facilitate consumers of electricity to become customers of the JPS by making it easier and more affordable to connect legally to the grid.
There's virtually no money for it.
Madam Speaker, there is a common misconception that the people who quote-unquote thief electricity only do it because they have no desire to play by the rules. It's not true. All of us in this House have sections of our constituencies where those activities are prevalent. And they're prevalent because to wire, you don't have that, Frank? You must be one of the exceptions. Southeast St. Elizabeth is a rich constituency. But, Madam Speaker, to wire a small house and to get it passed by the government electrical inspector.
150 grand.
Well, I was going to say 70 or 80 grand. Well, it gone up. No, Madam Speaker, at 100, 150,000. we know people cannot afford these costs. They can't. And so it will require the government playing an active role to encourage and facilitate those who want to connect legally.
Very important.
Now, there are some who don't want to connect. And the ones who don't want to connect legally, then law enforcement have to deal with them. Yeah. But I will tell you my own experience from my own constituency, where we did it in McGregor Gardens. We were able to move from three paying customers to having 80% of the community become paying customers. And we had the prepaid thing where they could buy credit and put it in the meter and they could consume electricity. Madam Speaker, in a privatized JPS, I don't know what will happen. I believe the government must retain its stake. We are in an energy crisis and we must have a voice at the table. Madam Speaker, crises and opportunity usually present themselves at the same time. And from the most recent energy shock, we must seize the opportunities. To support the new diverse energy economy of Jamaica, we will need significant human capital and skilled workers to design, create, and maintain systems. We will need, for example, mechanics for the electric cars, electricians trained in renewable technology, energy economists and auditors, and a slew of other professionals to support a local renewable industry. We need to put in place the training and the capacity building ahead of time, so that when more of these electric cars come, we have the capacity to maintain them. Madam Speaker, that is how we will narrow the gap and uplift our people. And let me welcome the acting Deputy Speaker from St. James Central. Who I will call you Madam Speaker. Micro, small, and medium-sized entities are the backbone of any economy, and Jamaica is no different. The past 2 years have revealed much about our local entrepreneurs, that our people are creative, focused, and given the opportunity can and will grow successful businesses. But many of our MSMEs desperately need support, and we believe the government can play an important role in ensuring that these businesses get the support they need. A perennial problem with MSMEs, and here, Mr. Speaker, I refer to micro as distinct from the small and the medium. I'm talking about micro here. Many of these micro businesses are informal. They operate at the community level. These are the people who run corner shops, cook shops, the ladies who do the nails and the hairdressing, etc. And more than any other, micro businesses find it hard to access funding. This lack of access to funding from formal sources makes micro business people vulnerable, and it forces them to seek funding from what I would call loan sharks.
And so many of them couldn't access care because of the influence.
Loan sharks. Now, these loan sharks are what I call informal lenders. They don't have a fixed address, and they go around community by community, and they lend. So, for example, Chef, who is a micro business operator, and he runs a cook shop. When Chef borrows $40,000 to purchase items for his cook shop, he has to pay back $3,000 every day for 1 month. Let me repeat. He borrow $40,000 and he have to pay back $3,000 every day for a month. So if you do the maths, Chef would have repaid that loan 2 times over a 1 month period, or more than that.
$1,000 percentage.
Now, many of our micro businesses don't understand the concept of interest rates, how they are calculated.
They just need access to
but they need the money, and they need the money quickly. Because if you don't get the money quickly and your shop can't operate, you can't sell nothing. So there are many who may question why you go to loan sharks. But many of these are filling a need and a gap in the market. because formal lenders do not lend to these people. And no, I'm not going to qualify it. I'm not saying everybody who lends is a loan shark. Not so. And I will qualify what I mean. Because you have legitimate microfinance entities who lend. I'm not referring to those. I'm not referring to those. These small lenders, predatory as their actions may seem, satisfy and meet a gap. That's right. But it means, Mr. Speaker, that many of the borrowers end up in a debt trap because they borrow to meet a particular need. They end up having to pay what is exorbitant interest rates, just a fixed amount every month, pay the loan 2 times over, and then they can't survive because all of what they earn goes to paying back the loan. We have to find a better way to help Chef, to help my barber Wayne in Papine, and all the other hardworking entrepreneurs who operate micro businesses. We must recognize that, and as the member from West Central said, not all small lenders are loan sharks. There are many legitimate and well-run microfinance institutions. So the solution would be to provide these micro businesses with the access to financing that they need to operate and expand, and give the small lenders an opportunity to legitimize their business and grow their clientele in a regulated manner. So I am proposing, Minister, that the DBJ directs a portion of the funding that it has for MSMEs and take a portion, it could be $1 billion, and directs that money not through banks, but through licensed and approved microfinance entities, so that they can then on-lend money to these micro-entrepreneurs. Many of the banks really don't have an interest in participating in this segment of the market. And the microfinance entities already have the skills, the know-how, and the infrastructure, because it is a very people-intensive business. So take a portion of that MSME money, put it in a special window through the microfinance entities, and on-lend it to these entrepreneurs. These are the cook shop people, the hairdressers and the barbers. And, Mr. Speaker, while the access to funding is the primary concern, that is not the only support they need. So we are recommending that we increase the support, for example, to JBDC, so that they can provide business development support, they can help them with financial literacy, they can help them to register their company. So while they are borrowing the money, we also growing their capacity. And they would be required to go to, whether it's workshops or whatever we do, so mandated, so that they can improve how they run their businesses and become more sustainable. Mr. Speaker, many of these micro businesses are the first port of call in our inner city communities and in rural communities. And while they're not formally registered and they may not pay income tax, they pay GCT because they buy goods and services which they sell to people in the community. And most importantly, they are a stabilizing force in communities. In the inner city communities, people go to the corner shop to buy them food every day, right? They go to the lady who does the nails and the hairdressing. And these businesses make the difference between whether these people can eat or not. So whether they're running a little cook shop, a barber shop, a bar, or their hair or nails, that work, that little hustle, is the income that keeps that person out of probably doing something else which would create problems for us as a community. My constituency has many of them living on the margins, and we have to find a better way to support them as they seek to grow their businesses. We simply cannot ignore nor shy away from finding solutions to their problems. The micro businesses are an important conduit for narrowing the economic gap and uplifting our people. Madam Speaker, I must make mention here of another group of small and medium-sized business people, our farmers. And for any country in the pursuit of growth, agriculture must be seen and treated as a growth driver and be given the necessary support. We need to swiftly advance the development of an agricultural development plan and ensure that we implement it. We must expand our traditional crops to maximize export earnings and develop value-added and value chain growth, as well as support the expansion of brand Jamaica globally. And we do have globally recognized brands, or Blue Mountain Coffee or cocoa already have significant competitive advantages globally. We have to expand our domestic crop production. Ganja is another one, and cannabis. We have to expand domestic crop production to address food security. So as we deal with the issues of the increasing cost of wheat, which will translate into higher prices for flour, we have to examine whether using cassava, breadfruit, other things, we can use as substitutes, so we don't have to depend on the wheat for flour. I'm going to get to that, the cost of fertilizer as well. Madam Speaker, we have to increase the use of technology and innovation. This will lead to increased production and productivity, rural development, jobs, and import substitution. We also need to look at our livestock sector as another growth opportunity and the fisheries subsector. And we have to put research and development on the front burner and apply the knowledge we have amassed over the many years. We must use and improve our existing infrastructure to support agriculture. For example, Bodo's Research Center must be developed as a center of excellence in agricultural research for both crop and livestock. But we also have to develop other centers of excellence in coffee cultivation and production, which is becoming a dying specialty. Mr. Speaker, we have to use the dual global crisis of climate change and supply chain issues as an opportunity. We have to lay the groundwork for agriculture in Jamaica to take its rightful place as a significant contributor to growth and to improve our national resilience by ensuring food security. Now, there are some issues that we have to deal with immediately. When I travel through Jamaica and talk to farmers, there are three things that come up, particularly small farmers. Access to capital is a big one, particularly for small farmers. The increasing cost of inputs, particularly fertilizers, is having a crippling effect for farmers. And thirdly, the issue of pray their lastly, which continues to be a source of misery and vulnerability for our farmers. Madam Speaker, we have to hear the cry of the farmers and take action. And while I acknowledge that, for example, I know the Development Bank of Jamaica is doing something for the agricultural industry, there is still a gap for many of the small farmers. And so we had the PC banks, which were, when they were instituted, were designed to deal with small farmers. I'm aware that there have been a number of issues with the PC banks over the last 5 years, and it has been subject to an intervention which should have lasted, my understanding is, about a year. So, Minister, I'm going to call on you to give us an update on the status of the PC banks. The feedback I get from the farmers, them say the PC banks have become like commercial banks.
Yeah, too much required.
Them lend for car, this, that, that. But when you look at what their original mandate is, they are not fulfilling the original mandate. I know, as I said, there were issues which caused them to require an intervention. But we need to know where we are with the PC banks so that they can return to their original mandate of lending to small farmers. We also have to take the issue of pray their last name and deal with it with a sense of purpose. It is probably the most heart-rending thing for a farmer. After you buy your feed, you spend your time watering your crops. Yes. And as soon as it look like it going bare and it ripe, somebody come and thief it. It's heart-rending.
Wickedness.
It's wickedness. And this has discouraged people from going into the business and has actually forced people out of the business. I'm calling on the government, Minister, to amend the current fines under the Agricultural Produce Act to move it from $250,000 to $5 million. The players in the industry have been calling for that. And also for this act to be brought under the Proceeds of Crime Act and to treat pre-deal larceny as organized crime. Minister, you know that where the criminality going now, man a come for thief your goat and your cow so them can get the meat, so them can go Haiti and trade it for guns. So farmers now are subjected to a different level of criminal activity for which they are not prepared. Earlier, is either earlier this year or last year, some man go with rifle, tall up thing, and shoot up a farm. Shoot up a farm. Because the people were resisting their efforts to steal their crops. So we're not just talking about a man a thief to orange or banana. It is organized crime. And we have to treat it as organized crime and protect our farmers. Madam Speaker, farmers are self-reliant. They work hard. They're not seeking handouts. They're asking for support tailored to their needs. Investing in the agricultural sector, specifically in small farmers, will help us to narrow the gap and uplift a significant number of our people. Madam Speaker, I want to turn now to one of the most important challenges of our time. How do we resolve the crisis in education? The COVID pandemic has been truly devastating to a whole generation of students. And the report by Professor Orlando Patterson and his team has revealed many inconvenient and disturbing truths about the state of our education system, even before COVID. But if we are honest with ourselves, none of us should be surprised by the conclusions of the Patterson report because they echo what previous reports would have said. We have never been short on the analysis. What we are short on is the discipline and the political will to ensure that reforms are implemented. Now, Minister, in Parliament last week at Standing Finance, I had asked you some questions on the state of the learning loss. And when I heard the answers that you provided, I was a little skeptical about the data that you were providing. And I checked with some principals in my constituency and otherwise. And Minister, I have to tell you, there is a big disconnect between what you have reported here and the reality taking place in the schools. A big disconnect. So, for example, there are schools that I've checked for which there has not been any diagnostic testing at all. Not even one student has gotten a diagnostic test. And for some schools, yes, they have received tests, but they wouldn't consider it a diagnostic test. So, Minister, I believe the problems that we are in are worse than they are being reported. And I want to encourage you to personally go visit some of the schools with your education officers. Sit down and talk to the principals. Hear firsthand. Don't rely on what is reported to you. Right? Because, Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the worst response to a crisis is to not acknowledge the extent of it. And I believe we don't know the full extent of the learning loss. And if we don't know the full extent of the learning loss, we simply can't put in place appropriate programs to deal with the learning loss. I also, Minister, believe that we, and I want the Minister of Finance to hear me, because it's not just an issue for the Minister of Education, that we need to make some choices about priorities and resource allocations within our education sector. The Ministry has been pushing the Sixth Form Pathways program, for which I would say the business case is weak. I say it is weak because within the context of the Patterson report, which shows grave failings in our current system, I question why spend scarce resources to extend high school life by 2 years, when for the first 5 years, we're only producing about 50% of the students with literate, numerate, and marketable skills. I will say, I'm going to come to that. Apart from the monetary resources, I don't believe we have the managerial capacity to implement a remedial program while launching a sixth form program. So I'm going to propose, Minister, that we postpone the implementation of the sixth form program and that we focus all our energies on addressing the issue of the learning loss which currently exists. We must with urgency begin a national conversation and consultation about the way forward. In the 60th year of our independence, we can't accept that half of the students who spend 10 years in formal education leave illiterate, innumerate, and have no employable skills. And let me be clear, I'm not making a political point here, because this has existed over a long period of time. But we have to deal with it now, because we can't grow an economy if you don't have a competent, educated workforce. And education still remains the vehicle of upliftment for the vast majority of Jamaicans, particularly poor Jamaicans. So we don't have a lot of money. And in the context of having scarce resources, we have to choose how we spend the money. So we have to deal with the students who have missed, frankly, 2 years of school. But we have to assess the extent of the problem to know how to solve the problem. And I don't believe we are here. If we look at the issue of the Patterson report, I must confess that I was disappointed that there was no allocation in the budget to begin the process of transformation as recommended by that report. Yeah. It calls for additional expenditures of about $2.5–3 billion annually. But even before we get to the additional expenditures, we have to prepare for the implementation of the report. And I was disappointed that we don't seem to have an allocation to put a secretariat team together. Whoever would manage this process of overseeing the implementation of the Patterson report. And I don't know that it can be done within the ministry, that you would need a separate entity to work alongside the ministry. But we have to start the process now, because time is not on our hands. So even if we don't have the budgetary allocation to do everything, the short-term goal of putting in place a team must begin with a sense of urgency. So I hope, Minister, that it may not be from you, it may be from the Minister of Finance or the Prime Minister, that we get an update on where we are with implementing the recommendations. We have done reports. We did the Ray Davis report and we started a process of transformation. That didn't continue. We now have the Patterson report. Let us ensure that the mechanism for implementation is bipartisan, that we get the best and the most talented people to oversee the process, and that we can make a difference in dealing with the shortcomings in our education system. Our education system presents the opportunity to narrow the gap and to uplift our people. Madam Speaker, as we seek to improve the fundamentals and the foundations of our economy with investments and improvements in our MSMEs, we must also make ourselves ready for the future of work. I would consider myself a young man, but when I attended the greatest high school in Jamaica, I know the member from East Central St. Catherine would clap. You want me to repeat, Big Rob? When I attended the greatest high school in Jamaica. And when I went to Career Day, Madam Speaker, when I went to Career Day, there was nobody who said, do you want to become a YouTube content creator? Do you want to become an app UX designer? Or do you want to become a cryptocurrency miner? Because those kind of careers never existed. The world our young people are coming to is increasingly one that is digitized, mobile, and decentralized, and looks nothing like what most of us experienced when we were in high school. So, Madam Speaker, when we talk about narrowing the gap and uplifting people, we are speaking of the sort of visionary leadership that drives success, opportunity, and innovation. When in the 90s, led by the member from East Kingston and Port Royal, when we broke the telecoms monopoly, that triggered a whole set of small and medium-sized industries whose operations today has been facilitated by that move. In the upcoming decades, many activities that are currently being carried out by people will become automated, but some professions will remain. Robotization, automation, digitalization will have a major impact on the labor force and the modern workforce. Data shows that the most promising careers of the future consist of work that complements machine work, or work that largely depends on human skills, creativity, innovation, and therefore cannot be replicated by a computer. In other words, Madam Speaker, the future of work has already arrived for a large majority of our workforce. As a result, Jamaica needs to think of the industries of the future that will create economic growth and, importantly, think through what our workforce will need to be able to participate in these industries. Madam Speaker, when we speak about the future of work and the industries of the future that will lead us to economic growth, we have to think about the areas where Jamaica has displayed prowess, competence, and accomplishment. For us, that clearly must include the cultural and creative industries. There is a vast unrealized opportunity for people and for our economy to capitalize in the creative and cultural industries. Let us look at the potential, for example. In 2020, the music industry globally represented $23 billion US. The sports market globally reached a value of $388 billion in 2020 and is projected to reach $826 billion by 2030. The global film and video market is expected to reach $410 billion by 2030. So Jamaica needs to secure its place in this global creative economy. But we won't secure our place by accident. We need to be deliberate and we need to be strategic. And we need to take it seriously. So what do I mean by taking it seriously? It is recognizing that the creative and cultural industries are more than dance, stage show, and round robin. And those are important, but they are much more than that. And that there's much more to be done on a policy and governance level to reach our full potential. So, Madam Speaker, we on this side welcome with the same anticipation as the Minister the reopening of the entertainment sector. And while I don't know the Minister friend, Keisha, the one he spoke about on Tuesday, I expect that when the industry is reopened, you know Keisha? You know Keisha? Madam Speaker, I'm expecting that when the entertainment industry opens, whether it's Notsi, whether it's Juicy, or whoever it is, that they will play a role in this industry. Their contribution is often understated and not respected and not recognized as it should be. Or actors, or dancers, or singers, or players of instruments, chefs, stage managers, and I could go on and on. The scope of excellence for our people is unlimited. The first thing we need to understand and accept is that the cultural and creative industries is a complex ecosystem and is not a monolithic concept. Within the creative and cultural industries, there are no fewer than 20 subsectors. And within those 20 subsectors, we have another 40 industries that can be identified, each with activities, linkages, and products. What obtains now, Madam Speaker, will not move us along a holistic, sustainable path for the development of these industries. So, for example, If you take the creative and cultural industries, it is spread across no fewer than 6 ministries. Broadcasting falls under the Ministry of Information. Film is under JAMPRO. Radio, Spectrum and Telecoms under the Ministry of Science. JCDC under the Ministry of Culture. Animation is under the OPM. Culinary Arts and Craft under Tourism. And if you need an event license, it requires going to the Ministry of Local Government and the police and the parish councils. The practical result of this fragmentation is that some of our practitioners fall through the cracks. And I'll give you a real example of someone who is a potter. He's registered on the Creative Registry, but when the government assigned relief funds last year under the CARE program, he went on the website to look if his sector was identified, but it wasn't. Now we have a rich history of potters, from Cecil Jean Pearson and others. But for some reason, potters were not identified in that subsector. So while musicians and actors, animators and others got some relief, potters didn't. And I use potters as an example because there are probably many other industries and sectors within the creative sector that were also not captured. The absence of structure and fragmentation is replicated in the classifications by Statin in recording the contribution of the creative industries in the national accounts. For sure, its contribution is understated because although the various aspects of the industry are recorded, they are not identified collectively. So we don't really know the size and scope of the creative industry. Even within government, we don't have full accounting of the assets that we have within the public service. So we need to start with one very low-hanging fruit, which is to do an audit of the industry to determine what we have so that we can plan and go forward knowing the assets that we have. The information and data is needed to plan properly. And without that, we won't be able to leverage or maximize our full potential. We need to make some fundamental decisions on how we deploy our resources in support of development. We have success stories. We have world-class artists. We have world-class sportsmen and women. And we need to ensure that they don't become the one-offs, but we put in place a system so that we can produce more and more of those as a matter of course. Taking our creative industries and creative and cultural industries seriously requires a recognition that these assets are worthy of government attention, policy solutions, and investment. And it will require discussion, consultation, and re-education of our leaders and technocrats. But we must begin now. Investing in our creative and cultural industries is one sure way that we can narrow the gap and uplift our people.
Hear, hear.
And I conclude in, Madam Speaker. As our Diamond Jubilee finds us tackling unprecedented crises, globally we have high oil prices, we have supply chain issues, we have climate change. Locally we have to deal with COVID, we have to deal with crime, we have corruption, we have inequalities, and we have inflation. All of these are real crises that need real credible solutions because they impact our people. Real credible solutions start with recognizing the realities of the world we live in and crafting policies that narrow the gap between the haves and the have-nots. The budget is built on the back of the Jamaican people. And while all of us bear the burden, the most vulnerable, the middle class, the working poor, the unemployed, the single parents, the pensioners, they are bearing a disproportionate burden. A strong first step to tackling these crises must be for the government to recalibrate this budget to reflect the realities of our global and local environment. The monies that are allocated to deal with the increases in the cost of gas and to deal with the food costs are simply not adequate. And in a time of crisis like we have now, where families are struggling to eat and make ends meet, the government has a responsibility to ensure that not only the poor and the most vulnerable are protected, but those who are on the periphery, those who are living paycheck by paycheck. We know that economic growth is important and is our only way forward. We also know that in a rapidly changing, digitized global economy, all paths to growth start with our people. People-centric solutions start with education. So we must find the political will to tackle the crisis in our school and to fix our education system once and for all. We must prepare our children for success in a global environment and for the future of work that looks nothing like what our generation or previous generations were familiar with. Crisis and opportunity present themselves at the same time. We must urgently tackle the problems that our micro and small businesses face. We must break down the barriers that small farmers face. We must be bold in advancing energy diversification. Our creative and cultural industries have the potential to put Jamaica on a steady path to economic growth. We should not waste this crisis nor disregard the opportunities. We need to act now. Madam Speaker, in our 60th year of independence, the Jamaica Labour Party has held government for roughly half the time, and the People's National Party for about half the time as well. Both parties deserve praise for our progress, but we also share the blame for some of our failures. But for the Jamaican people to achieve our greatest potential, there can't be any green solutions nor orange solutions. We must just have Jamaican solutions to Jamaican problems. All of us have a collective responsibility to help propel the country towards growth, but we need innovative, accountable, and compassionate leadership. Madam Speaker, we call on the government to put people first, to give us a budget that balances the books while balancing people's lives, and that narrows the gap and uplifts the people. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Giving some time for the member to be patted on the back and to bask in the moment. I wasn't here. Members, I enjoyed the presentation. I wondered after listening to the finance minister's opening if there would be any possible comeback. Not to rain on your parade, I really would have
Madam
preferred
Speaker, could you allow me 1 minute? I noticed my speech was circulated with this. I wasn't aware of it. Somebody did the artwork, and I wasn't aware. I've been in this house long enough to know that this is not acceptable for the House of Representatives.
Thank you so much.
I just want to apologize. I'm seeing it actually for the first time, right? And I have presented many times, and I've never done this. So I will ask the members to give me back. I will circulate it electronically so that they can have it. All right?
Nobody needs... Members, I leave the House Leader to speak, and I'm going to ask that no other member make any contribution in this regard. Member Robinson, I appreciate the stance that you took. Persons actually did complain, and I asked them to just be quiet about it because today was your moment, and I really didn't want us to bring any negativity to your presentation and the time delivering. So I really appreciate it. I was asking to leave it for another time, and persons indicated they really wanted to raise it because it had never happened in the House before. House Leader?
Madam Speaker, I am always fascinated by not just your eloquence, but your even-handedness in dealing with matters. And I think that the member who really gave an excellent presentation is mindful of the error and has appropriately referenced correction, and we accept it. Madam Speaker, the other matter on public business I will take at this time because in addition to everything else, I think the member has another engagement and we are appreciative of that. So the Irrigation Licensing Authority Order 2022 resolution, we invite you to take at this time, after which, Madam Speaker, I will seek a suspension of the standing order to allow us to recommit the items that we had not taken earlier. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, House Leader. Minister Charles.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you to our House Leader as well. Madam Speaker, table before this Honourable House is the Irrigation Licensing of Authority Order 2022 and the Irrigation Licensing of Authority Order 2022 resolution. Now, as a matter of background, the Honourable House is advised that Section 4 of the Irrigation Act empowers the Minister to license by order, subject, of course, to affirmative resolution, a company to be the irrigation authority for the purposes of the Act. A company so licensed shall be responsible for the implementation of the provisions of the Act in relation to all irrigation areas and restricted areas. The National Irrigation Commission Limited, NIC, is a wholly owned government company incorporated under the Companies Act of Jamaica, and it was so licensed, subject to affirmative resolution on July 5, 2011, for a period of 10 years by virtue of an order entitled the Irrigation Authority Licensing of the National Irrigation Commission Limited Order 2011. The order was thereafter gazetted and took effect on July 11, 2011, and subsequently expired in 2021. Consequently, it has become necessary for the further licensing of an entity as the Irrigation Authority to continue to carry out the functions under the Act, and in 2021, the erstwhile Minister responsible for Agriculture and Fisheries then took the decision to further license the NIC as the Irrigation Authority for a further period of 30 years. And this Honourable House is further advised that the rationale and the justification for granting the increased licensing term of 30 years to the NIC is 1, to provide greater stability and entrenchment of the NIC as the Irrigation Authority, 2, to facilitate long-term infrastructural planning and implementation of projects, including the retention of long-term leases, some of which are in excess of 10 years, as we know. 3, to leverage investment opportunities with external or multilateral entities, envisioning both short-term and long-term investments. 4, to promote flexibility, commitment, and security in the NIC's operations. And 5, to reduce the necessity for frequent licensing renewals, which entails a fairly lengthy legislative process. And 6, to facilitate the continuity of the Government of Jamaica's sustainable development plans, policies, and implementation processes. This Honourable House is further advised that the decision to increase the licensing term to the NIC to 30 years has received Cabinet's approval by way of Cabinet Decision number 01/22, subject, of course, again to affirmative resolution. Madam Speaker, the order therefore provides, inter alia, 4, the licensing of the National Irrigation Commission Limited as the Irrigation Authority for a period of 30 years from the date of commencement. It provides for the collection of revenues derived from irrigation and drainage charges and the application of these revenues to perform the functions assigned under the Act. Provides for the collection of any amounts outstanding as irrigation charges or drainage charges that are due to be paid under the Act. And it provides for the transfer of persons employed to the former Irrigation Authority to the service of the authority on terms and conditions that are no less favorable than those enjoyed by those persons before the commencement of this order. Based on the foregoing, Madam Speaker, I ask this Honourable House for its full support in affirming by resolution the Irrigation Licensing of Authority Order 2022. Thank you.
Madam Speaker, we have no. Thank you, ma'am. We have no objection to the proposed approval of the resolution approving the order.
Thanks, Opposition Leader. So we're at the end of public business as it relates to the debate. So I'm going to put the resolution and then we will go to closing the debate. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Resolution is passed. As it relates to our continued sectoral debate, we suspend.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move for the suspension of the debate on the appropriations bill until Tuesday, the 15th of March, when the Speaker will be the Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Mark Golding. May it please you, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, I further beg to move for the recommittal of items, reports to committee, notices of motions given orally, and statement by Minister. May it please
Thank you,
Madam
House Leader. So the question is that we recommit reports from committees, notices of motions given orally, and then statement by ministers. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Reports from committee, Member Phillips, PAC.
Madam Speaker, please permit me to speak from a seat other than my own. Thank you.
You are so permitted.
Madam Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following reports. Report of the Public Administration Appropriations Committee on its deliberations with the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development regarding reports of financial and contractual irregularities at the Manchester, Hanover and Westmoreland municipal corporations. Second, report of the Public Administration Appropriations Committee on its deliberations with the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce. Report of the Public Administration Appropriations Committee on its deliberations on the impact of the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic on the tourism sector. Report of the Public Administration Appropriations Committee on its deliberations on the conflict resolution initiatives of the Ministry of Justice. Report of the Public Administration Appropriations Committee on the deliberations with the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries on the coronavirus COVID-19 measures to revive the sector. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following motions. Be it resolved that report of the Public Administration Appropriations Committee on its deliberations with the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development regarding reports of financial and contractual irregularities.
Member Phillips, I'm going to hold as it relates to your report from committee, and we will continue with some additional reports from committee, after which we will go to notices of motion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Member. Member Whittle.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following reports. Report of the Regulations Committee of the House of Representatives and its deliberations on the Radio and Telegraph Control Private Radio Service Amendment Regulations 2022. The report of the Regulations Committee of the House of Representatives and its deliberations on the Radio and Telegraph Control Maritime Mobile Radio Service Amendment Regulation 2022. The report of the Regulations Committee of the House of Representatives and its deliberations on the Telegraph Control Amateur Radio Service Amendment Regulation 2022. The report of the Regulations Committee of the House of Representatives and its deliberations on the Radio and Telegraph Control Radio Operations and the Technician Amendment Regulation 2022. Report of the Regulations Committee of the House of Representatives and its deliberations on the Radio and Telegraph Controlled Citizen Band Radio Service Amendment Regulation 2022.
Thank you. Notices of motions given orally. Member Phillips.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following motions. Be it resolved that the report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee on its deliberations with the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development regarding reports of financial and contractual irregularities at the Manchester, Hanover, and Westmoreland Municipal Corporations, which was laid on the table of the House on the 10th day of March 2022, be approved. Be it resolved that the report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee on its deliberations with the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce, which was laid on the table of the House on the 10th day of March 2022, be approved. Be it resolved that the report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee on its deliberations on the impact of the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic on the tourism sector, which was laid on the table of the House on the 10th day of March 2022, be approved. Be it resolved that the report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee on its deliberations on the conflict resolution initiatives of the Ministry of Justice, which was laid on the table of the House on the 10th day of March 2022, be approved. Be it resolved that the report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee on its deliberations on the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries on the coronavirus COVID-19 measures to revive the sector, which was laid on the table of the House on the 10th day of March 2022, be approved. If it pleases you, Madam Speaker.
Member Whittle.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following motions. Be it resolved that the report of the Regulations Committee of the House of Representatives and its deliberations and the Radio and Telegraph Control Private Radio Service Amendment Regulation 2022, which was laid on the table of the House on the 10th day of March 2022, be approved. Be it resolved that the report of the Regulations Committee of the House of Representatives and its deliberations and the Radio and Telegraph Control Maritime Mobile Radio Service Amendment Regulation 2022, which was laid on the table of the House on the 10th day of March 2022, be approved. Be it resolved that the Regulations Committee of the House of Representatives, the report and its deliberations on the Radio and Telegraph Control Amateur Radio Service Amendment Regulation 2022, which was laid on the table of the House on the 10th day of March 2022, be approved. Be it resolved that the report of the Regulations Committee of the House of Representatives and its deliberations on the Radio and Telegraph Control, Radio Operations and Technician Amendment Regulation 2022, which was laid on the table of the House on the 10th day of March, be approved. Be it resolved that the report of the Regulations Committee of the House of Representatives and its deliberations and the Radio and Telegraph Control Citizens Band Radio Service Amendment Regulation 2022, which was laid on the table of the House on the 10th day of March 2022, be approved.
Thank you, Member. Minister Samuda.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, whereas by virtue of Section 3 of the Minimum Wage Act, thereafter referred to as the Act, the Minister may, by order published in the Gazette, fix minimum wage rates for wages for any occupation in the island, either generally or in any specified area, place, or district, in any case in which he is satisfied that the wages being paid to any person employed in any such occupation are unreasonably low, and may, if he is satisfied that it is desirable so to do, fix a minimum wage applicable subject to the provisions of that section to occupations generally, and whereas, pursuant to subsection 3 of Section 3 of the Act, the Minister may by order vary or cancel a minimum wage, and whereas, as the 9th day of March 2022, the Minister made the National Minimum Wage Amendment Order 2022. And whereas it is provided by subsection 5 of Section 3 of the Act that an order made under that section in relation to a national minimum wage shall be subject to affirmative resolution of the House of Representatives. And whereas it is desirable that the National Minimum Wage Amendment Order 2022 should be affirmed by resolution. Now, therefore, be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the National Minimum Wage Amendment Order 2022 resolution. And 2. The National Minimum Wage Amendment Order 2022 is hereby affirmed. Whereas, Madam Speaker, by virtue of Section 3 of the Minimum Wage Act, hereafter referred to as the Act, the Minister may, by order published in the Gazette, fix minimum rates of wages for any occupation in the island, either generally or in any specified area, place, or district, in any case in which he is satisfied that the wages being paid to any persons employed in any such occupation are unreasonably low, and may, if he is satisfied that it is desirable so to do, fix a national minimum wage applicable subject to the provisions of that section to occupations generally. And whereas, pursuant to subsection 3 of clause 3 of the Act, the Minister may by order vary or cancel a minimum wage. And whereas on the 9th day of March 2022, the Minister made the minimum wage industrial security guards Amendment Order 2022, and whereas it is provided by subsection 5 of Section 3 of the Act that an order made under that section in relation to a national minimum wage shall be subject to affirmative resolution of the House of Representatives. And whereas it is desirable that the Minimum Wage Industrial Security Guards Amendment Order 2022 be affirmed by resolution. Now, therefore, be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the Minimum Wage Industrial Security Guards Amendment Order 2022 resolution. And 2. The Minimum Wage Industrial Security Guards Amendment Order 2022 is hereby affirmed. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
So members, the Minister just gave notice that at the next meeting of the House, he will move that the Minimum Wage Amendment Order 2022 resolution and the Minimum Wage Industrial Security Guard Amendment Order 2022 resolutions will be taken. Thank you, Minister. Next, we will have statement by Minister Christopher Tufton, Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's been a long day, and so I'll try not to detain us for too much longer. However, today, Madam Speaker, I rise to address this Honourable House and the people of Jamaica on this, the 10th day of March 2022, exactly to the day, 2 years after the island recorded its first case of COVID-19, and 1 year exactly to the day since the country began the administering of the COVID-19 vaccine. March 10th, Madam Speaker, colleagues, a very significant date in our history as it relates to the COVID-19 virus. Jamaica has now reached, Madam Speaker, in our estimation, a crossroads in our nation's development trajectory. 100 years ago, the flu pandemic transitioned the world to a new era of dealing with the public health crises that have the potential to devastate not only the health of the population, but the economic and social fabric of nations. Out of the pandemic, visionary leaders capitalized on the opportunities that are intrinsic to all crises, and they developed new models of medicine, new paradigms in research and technology, new systems of governance, and new infrastructure to deal with the management of the risk associated with the advent of these adverse occurrences. As we stand, Madam Speaker, colleagues, at this crossroads, we're called to deep introspection, analysis, and creative and critical thinking to not only draw us out of the slump of the last 2 years, but to emulate our predecessors and ensure that the recovery process leads us to a brighter future in terms of repairing and rebuilding and emerging stronger and more resilient. Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Health and Wellness, the Government of Jamaica, has the unenviable task of shaping what can be described as the new normal, the new world that we will live in, and how we manage this transition to living freer, recognizing our vulnerabilities, particularly those that were shown up over the last 2 years. Within the context of the ministry, the call to greater resilience in the creation of a more robust, more modern health system must be the pivot point for our new normal. Over the past 2 years, many decisions had to be made to save lives and preserve livelihoods. The trade-offs were too often negative outcomes, to include the economic downturn, the missed and lost learning that our children have suffered, the mental, social, and psychological impact of the lockdowns and curfew restrictions, and the change in our normal way of life because of the physical distancing and the mask-wearing rules, just to name a few. These, Madam Speaker, and other factors have resulted in visible and invisible impacts on our society, our lives, and our people. As a Ministry of Health and Wellness, our commitment must be to not only support the efforts to mitigate the damage caused by these necessary actions, but to call for a health in all policy approach as we form partnerships with ministries, departments, and agencies, the private sector and religious groups, civil society groups, to address the challenges ahead of us. The goal, Madam Speaker, is to arrive at a more resilient health system, but the determinants of health are in all sectors. It involves all of us. Over the 2 years, we have seen over 2,800 persons die from COVID-19 in Jamaica. And again, I believe you will all join with me in expressing our condolences to those victims, families, and friends. This represents a mortality rate, Madam Speaker, of 2.2%. We regret every life lost and share in the grief of the families that have been impacted. It is to be noted also that there are others who now suffer the lingering effects of COVID-19. Persons who suffer from fatigue, shortness of breath, a difficulty breathing, persistent cough, memory loss, concentration challenges, sleep problems, depression, and anxiety, just to name a few. These clinical presentations, Madam Speaker, described by some as long COVID, will occupy our efforts for some time to come and requires a response. While we regret every life lost, it is to be noted that while the world averaged a death rate of some 4.2%, Jamaica's 2.2% is an indication that we were well below the world's average, and it's a testament to the resilience and the response of our health workers and frontline workers. Madam Speaker, over 7,000 Jamaicans with COVID-19, 7% of whom had severe conditions, were able to pass through our health system and have gone on to resume their regular lives. We must not lose sight of these facts, as the strength of the current primary and secondary care system is a critical part of the foundations upon which we will need to build a more resilient system we all desire. Undoubtedly, Madam Speaker, we cannot cast a blind eye to the pre-existing gaps. The gaps are not only in the physical infrastructure and equipment, but there are issues that have impacted our human resources for health capacities that have to be addressed as we navigate the future. Over the past 2 years of the pandemic, more than 700 nurses migrated for better paying jobs abroad. And as the pandemic subsides and the short-term economic shock takes hold, we will have a stronger migration pull, we believe, on our nurses and our healthcare workers. We do have healthcare workers that are world known as being excellent, and the demand for them, Madam Speaker, will only get greater, and the impact on our system will be even more severe if we do not take some corrective measures. Over the past 24 months, the ministry has had significant increase in its fiscal provision that has enabled us to make advances in the achievement of strategic goals 4 and 6 of our 10-year strategic plan. And we must celebrate the successes, Madam Speaker, that we have had coming out of this crisis. The member on the opposite who spoke earlier spoke to opportunities in crisis. And I believe we have had several despite the challenges of COVID. Under Strategic Goal 4, to ensure human resource for health, we have been able to establish 230 new posts for medical officers and over 1,400 posts for community health aides. And these are not, in most cases, contract workers, certainly as it relates to the doctors. We have established these posts, and it means an expansion of personnel in our health system. Under Strategic Goal 6, to make infrastructure available for health services delivery, we have constructed 2 wards at the St. Joseph's Hospital and the Falmouth Hospitals. These wards, while constructed to increase capacity for COVID-19 patients, Madam Speaker, will in the aftermath of COVID provide much needed space to be able to expand the services offered at these hospitals. In addition, Madam Speaker, the capacity to mobilize field hospitals and the infrastructure that have been put in place at the University Hospital of the West Indies, Spanish Town, Maypen, Sablamar hospitals will serve as well-needed overflow areas and be part of our contingency plans in case of disasters in the future. Madam Speaker, we are coming out of COVID. Let me knock wood here because there are still monitoring that is required, as a much stronger health system, certainly as it relates to infrastructure than we went in 2 years ago. Madam Speaker, we have also done much needed improvements to infrastructure in most hospitals to improve infection prevention and control, to provide isolation areas and capacity for managing high dependency patients. This work has been done at the Kingston Public, Spanish Town, Linstead, Princess Margaret, Maypen, Lionel Town, Mandeville, Black River, Percy Jr., Noel Holmes, and Anota Bay hospitals, Madam Speaker. In terms of oxygen delivery, the infrastructure for oxygen delivery has been improved significantly with piping of several hospitals to ensure safety, efficient, and reliable delivery of oxygen to patients. This includes a number of hospitals, Anota Bay, Port Antonio, National Chest, Spanish Town, Kingston Public, Maypen, Mandeville, Lionel Town, Percy Jr., Black River, Cornwall Regional, Sablamar, Falmouth, and the Noel Holmes hospitals. Additionally, Madam Speaker, bulk storage capacity has been placed at Princess Margaret, National Chest, and the Cornwall Regional hospitals, with additional cylinders put in place in these facilities. In terms of ventilators and radiological intervention, Madam Speaker, and members of this House, you will remember at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a great concern that we did not have enough ventilators in the country. Over the last 2 years, the Ministry has purchased additional ventilators, and we have received donations from our partners, and through the PROMAC project, overall, we now have 167 ventilators in Ireland and have established 40 additional high dependency spaces in our hospital beds. That's over 150% increase, Madam Speaker and members of this House, to what we had 2 years ago. Our capacity for radiological interventions have also increased with the addition of 6 portable X-rays that were purchased by the ministry. This was also boosted by donations from Japan. In terms of testing capacity, Madam Speaker, lab services at both the National Public Health Lab and the National Influenza Center, we have increased capacity for PCR testing for the detection of new and emerging pathogens. Also, there has been the establishment of gene sequencing capacity for microorganisms of PH interest at the University Hospital of the West Indies, and soon to be commenced at the National Public Health Lab. We have also commenced planning for the establishment of a biosafety lab, level 3, at the National Public Health Lab to be able to better respond to public health emergencies. We have strengthened, Madam Speaker, our surveillance capacity through increased use of available technologies. Again, strengthening our health systems where we will be better to face challenges in the future. In terms of GIS technology, we have made significant investment in GIS technology and are now able to chart and geolocate the prevalence of disease within country. Digitization of the Class 1 notification system, COVID bed occupancy, disaster management, and health facility status will now give us, in public health, and by extension, the country, the ability to analyze real-time data and therefore make us better able to make timely responses in emergency situations. Madam Speaker, we are stronger over the last 2 years as a result of the COVID pandemic. Madam Speaker, there has also been increased manpower capacity to these areas that will augur well for the improvement in the use of this technology going forward. With these actions, Madam Speaker, the Ministry continues to strengthen the technical capacity to provide better support to the delivery of public health. Madam Speaker, a critical part of the COVID-19 story, 2 years on, March 10th, exactly 2 years on, must be the way in which partnerships have been used to support the collective efforts of mitigating the impact of the pandemic. Through partnerships with the WHO, PAHO, UN agencies, partnerships with the private sector, civil society, bilateral engagements, the diaspora, the government of Jamaica, and by extension the Ministry of Health, has been able to access critical investments that have enabled the government to achieve many of the mission-critical outcomes in the war against COVID-19. Today, Madam Speaker, colleagues, through these engagements, over $15 million US or $2 billion have been provided in cash or kind to this partnership efforts to strengthen our healthcare system. Donation in vaccines, the development of technological solutions for the rollout of the vaccine program, provision of social support in the form of groceries and other household items to communities that were impacted. The Minister of Finance spoke to that recently. Through the partnership with Japan, we have increased capacity in radiology with donation of 7 ultrasound machines, 6 portable X-ray machines that went to 6 hospitals. Through partnerships with Japan, South Korea, Saudi Arabia, Israel, we have increased capacity for monitoring and treatment with donations of ventilators, monitors, ECG machines, oxygen concentrators, and other medical equipment. Through partnerships with PAHO, WHO, and other UN agencies in collaboration with Canada, the UK, and Germany, we have received PPEs, equipment such as blood pressure machines, pulse oximeters, ECGs, monitors, beds, resuscitation trolleys, computers, tablets, and cell phones. And I want to pause here, Madam Speaker, to thank all our partners at the multilateral, bilateral, national level who combined have allowed us a response to achieve the goals or the objectives that we have set for ourselves in confronting and overcoming this challenge. These actions have demonstrated once more the efficacy of partnerships in the promotion of public health. These efforts have resulted in the strengthening of the health system and have opened up new opportunities for engagement and collaboration on other issues affecting the health resilience of the country. Our task, Madam Speaker, colleagues, arising out of every disaster is to build back better and stronger and to create a society that is stronger with the capacity to repel and resist the impact that we have seen with this pandemic. That has been our objective all along. We must now build a public health system that is reliable and proficient, that provides to the people of this country the best opportunities for the increase in life chances and economic mobility and viability. In order to do this, we must seek to capture and learn from the lessons of COVID-19. And we are now engaged in a process internally, Madam Speaker, colleagues, of assessing the last 2 years, now that we believe that we are seeing the end of this pandemic based on what we are observing now scientifically. In order to do this, we must seek to capture and learn, as I said, the lessons. Powerful and transformative experiences around social and economic equality, realities in the global system and in transnational trade, and the impact of media on the formation and development of ideas and behavior. We must learn from and appreciate the vulnerabilities created by NCDs, lifestyle diseases. Most persons who ended up in the hospital, most persons who died, and I'm talking about 90+%, were persons with underlying conditions, a non-communicable disease, a lifestyle disease. They were the most vulnerable. They were already sick when they got COVID. We must recognize that the solution to building resilience must also be in influencing behavior, health-seeking behavior as we move forward. All of these are perhaps not new lessons, Madam Speaker. For public health, we have faced many disasters and have recovered stronger. However, this COVID-19 pandemic, the greatest disaster of our time, requires new thinking around how we manage the new normal. And 2 years on, this is what we must do as leaders, both at the Ministry of Health, but as leaders in the country, across the aisle, and in all sectors. Madam Speaker, all of these are perhaps, as I said, not new, and there are 3 main actions that we must therefore we must therefore take in consideration in our effort to deal with issues that face us in this, what I would like to consider post-COVID era, this 21st century. Firstly, we must build a cadre of health workers that is customer-centric, and we are going to be spending some time on that, Madam Speaker, in the ministry. By this, we mean that our human resources for health policies must reach back as far as the secondary education system and begin the training of health professionals.
Minister, the member's time for speaking has expired. House Leader.
5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the member's time be extended by 5 minutes to allow him to complete his presentation. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, I really thank the members for the opportunity, because I think the March 10th date is momentous and the numbers are encouraging now, and I really do believe that we should recognize those who have sacrificed for getting us to this point. So, Madam Speaker, firstly, we must build a cadre of health workers that is customer-centric. By this we mean that our human resources for health policy must reach back as far as the secondary education system and begin the training of health professionals that never lose their humanity and appetite for empathy in human suffering. We must find opportunities to inculcate more values and systems that allow our people to feel that they are being served in a manner that does not rob them of their humanity nor deprive them of their decency. Our COVID-19 experience has taught us the need to entrench compassion and compassionate care in the health system so that anyone who does not participate in this culture is left on the periphery as an outlier and not as part of the normal actors, but an anomaly that should be treated and reformed. We must redouble our efforts, Madam Speaker, to train the existing cadre of healthcare workers in delivering care with compassion. Our second effort, Madam Speaker, is in building a more resilient system, is in making significant improvements in all aspects of the health infrastructure. Within the Vision for Health 10-year strategic plan, the Ministry will be making significant investments to improve the health infrastructure with the rehabilitation, expansion and construction of facilities in all parishes across the island. However, our experience over the last few years have taught us that without a proper maintenance infrastructure, we will never be able to sustain these investments nor create the resilience required. We must admit that the government has no competitive advantage, Madam Speaker, in certain areas of operation, and we must look to the private sector to partner with us in creating this more resilient health system. Very important, fundamental policy going forward that we will embrace and implement. We must be far more purposeful in our efforts to forge public-private partnerships in the health systems, capitalizing on the natural value-added services of the private sector, and augment those with structure and systemic approach of the public sector to create synergies that will increase the return of investments that will be made over the next 10 years, Madam Speaker. Our new model must develop PPPs, public-private partnerships, that support leasing arrangements, building, own and operate arrangements, as well as partnerships that will allow cross-transfer of technical skills and know-how to increase patient care and access to health service. The third, Madam Speaker, and final area in making health system resilience a reality must be our investment in health promotion and prevention and improving health-seeking behavior to reduce the impact of lifestyle diseases. Currently, Madam Speaker, over 75% of deaths in the country are from persons who have developed an illness based on how they live and interact with their environment, their consumption habits, their lack of physical activity. We must correct that, and that is to change behavior. Madam Speaker, COVID-19 has taught us that poor health and a lack of personal responsibility for health outcomes can be a threat to the resilience of the whole society. As we build from this experience, we now need to redouble, indeed triple our efforts to reduce the primordial impacts on individual health, increase primary prevention through improvement in healthy lifestyle choices, improve health-seeking behavior to know key aspects of your health status, and once diagnosed, to have your disease profile controlled. That will ensure not just longevity of life, Madam Speaker, it will improve quality of life. Too many Jamaicans suffering COVID-19 because they were walking sick people. The statistics are clear. 1 out of 2 Jamaicans are overweight or obese. 1 out of 10 Jamaicans have diabetes. 1 out of 3 are hypertensive. The effects of these conditions led to premature death. And as shown by the COVID-19 experience, 75% of the persons who were hospitalized had these comorbid conditions, and over 80% of persons who died suffered from these conditions. I saw where one person was asked on social media whether it was COVID that killed the persons classified as COVID deaths, or it was other conditions. And I wanted to respond, but I opted not to, so as not to start a debate on social media. But clearly, the virus infects you, and it weakens your immune system. And therefore, if you have an already weakened immune system, it facilitates your death. And that connection has to be made in the assessment of the impact of COVID. Our resilience as a nation, finally, and as a public health system must therefore rest, Madam Speaker, on increasing our efforts to mobilize the nation in an effort to recognize that prevention is better than cure, and that preemptive action can not only save lives, but can also increase the viability of the entire country and improve our resistance to future health shocks. Madam Speaker, in my sectoral presentation, I will provide more details on these strategies and will seek to highlight the Ministry's plans and efforts in the short, medium, and long term to actualize these efforts. As a ministry and as a country, our efforts to manage the COVID-19 pandemic have not always been smooth or without conflict and disagreements. Madam Speaker, colleagues, it would have been absolutely impossible not to have divergent views. And our position was always to be guided by the science and to recognize also not just the science that is clinical, but the social sciences that speaks to survival. And we have always attempted to balance that. And we know in doing so, there would be divergent views. But I believe we pursued the right strategy. Madam Speaker, our efforts to manage the pandemic so far and continuously has been to achieve that balance. I certainly believe, even though this is not an indication that the pandemic is over, and I want to just clarify that this is a presentation 2 years on, where I believe we have made progress, we now have a playbook, and we are attempting to move on and to restore normality and to play catch-up where we have had side effects. So we will continue to observe, and we will continue to provide leadership and guidance to the country as it relates to the impact and threat of the virus. But we are encouraged, and I believe we must say so, that we are encouraged. I truly believe that this government has stood the test and will stand the test of time in terms of the leadership it has offered. And I want to close by thanking all those who have participated in this effort and to say, let us continue, as I do believe that we are closer to normality than we were in previous months. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Sorry, I did not see you all the way back there, Member
Thank
Guy.
you very much, Madam Speaker. Minister, thank you for the very comprehensive report that you have given for the past 2 years. Actually, I thought you were not going to speak in a sectoral after having delivered this. It has been 2 long years. We do agree it has been 2 long years, and 2 long years where the people of this country have undergone a lot in terms of not only the health status, but the other areas you mentioned, the social as well as the economic status. And it has been a year which I will agree with you that the resilience of the Jamaican people have really come to the fore, and that, as you have said in your closing, that there were challenging times and times where there are conflicts, but as all situations present themselves, there will be conflicts. Minister, the health team, they have performed admirably, creditably over the past 2 years. And we want from this side to endorse the support that you have made in your statement about their work for the country. We have always said that they have been there to protect us from ourselves, our own very selves. And it is probably time, Minister, although we're not out of the woods yet, that they mentioned effort in trying to give them some rest and relaxation, as well as the psychological support that they need and had needed during the pandemic be ramped up so that they can be refreshed to take on all the other outstanding and existing challenges that face them. We did indicate earlier on that, and there was a general agreement that COVID has exposed the underbelly of the health sector in this country. And I'm glad that your very comprehensive pre-sectoral presentation has given us some idea as to where the government's, as a colleague of ours once said, headspace is in terms of moving forward. Minister, there are a few things I want to comment on very briefly. One is, whereas there are serious plans in here to improve the health system in Jamaica, there are current issues that need to be attended to now. And I've spoken to you about it before. I mentioned the sector in the Standing Finance Committee, the situation like at Cape Page and Spanish Town, that every day impacts on the ability for the hospitals to do what they're doing. And I hope those are being attended to whilst you ramp up the other programs that are necessary. The matter of the improvement and the increase in the equipment that are being either donated or bought by the government for the respective hospitals. It is important too, Minister, so whilst you have increased the number of posts in the medical profession, in the community health aid, there's also the need to recognize that you need specialists to operate some of these. So in terms of creating posts for specialist posts, it is critical that it's not just entry-level doctors that are being added to the numbers, but that posts are actually being created for the specialists in the system. You mentioned the public-private partnership arrangements that is being contemplated, and I would only suggest that whilst those are ironed out, that part of the consideration is to ensure that the monetary arrangements that are being made with these public-private partners are met on a timely basis so that we do not, say, for example, run the risk of what happened at the Linac Cancer Treatment Center at St. Joseph Hospital some time ago. The matter, Minister, I'm happy that you mentioned about the posts, permanent posts in the health sector, creation of permanent posts. The only difficulty I have with that is that those posts that you have created were to have been created years ago. So we still need to have some more posts created, and I would urge you to have a look at that to ensure that we have continuity of the program. I'm very happy too, Minister, that the hospital, in terms of oxygen piping in the hospitals, has improved. However, I would ask the Minister to look at the manufacturing of the oxygen, because it's all well and good you have the delivery of it in the hospital setting, but the manufacturers are not able to provide it on a timely basis. I know you mentioned that there are plans to have hospital generation of oxygen, so I know that is going to come in the sectoral debate, because we cannot afford another August 2021 when we had some people shortage of oxygen. As it relates to ventilators, also personnel to operate those is critical, because our critical care nurses, as you alluded to, are sapped up by other first world countries because of the fact that our people are really in demand worldwide in terms of our nursing. So a renewed look has to be done with training for these. I want to join you as well to thank our international partners for what they have done not only in terms of a donation, but in terms of vaccines and coming to the rescue of the country when the COVAX facility could not give us those amounts in the time. And I'm also happy, Minister, that in this you mentioned about the health workers, the new paradigm in terms of a customer-centric training that is needed, because we hear the horror stories, not necessarily of medical treatment, but how they are treated at the hospitals. And I'm happy that it is going. Yes, maintenance of equipment is important. And Minister, I'm happy that in the final part you emphasize the public-private partnership. And because the early vaccination program did not recognize the significant contribution that the private sector could make in the delivery of the vaccines. And it's belatedly done now, but I'm happy that has been mentioned, because going forward, the kudos to the private sector in terms of the medical profession is important. Thank you very much. Those are my few. Go on.
House Leader.
Madam Speaker, in the motion for adjournment, I'd like to offer to the House the stated apologies of our Prime Minister for not being here today, and particularly he indicated to the member from Southeast St. Andrew, who he communicated with directly on the matter. Our Prime Minister has made it a duty to be in this House and on time, and is setting a great standard. As a matter of fact, I must say, colleagues, that in my years in this House and the other chamber, and I say it without fear of contradiction, I've never had a Prime Minister who has been as assiduous to duty and committed to the House in the way that our Prime Minister, Andrew Holness, has shown. And I'd like to make that a matter of record today. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I now move for the adjournment of the House, there being no further business contemplated for the day, to Tuesday, March 15 at 2 p.m. And as we indicated, it will be the continuation of the sectoral debate. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
The question is, with no further business, the House be adjourned until Tuesday, the 15th of March at 2 p.m. sharp. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. We now conclude our business for today. This House, this Honourable House, now stands adjourned.